All right, well, I'm ready. Let's call this meeting to order and welcome to the we've got the March 1st, 2021 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. Tonight is a work session, and we're delighted you all are with us this evening to join us. So please, Ms. Mester, read the notice, and let's get started with our meeting. And by the way, the agenda that you do have on the screen says February 22nd. Just
Yep, you're right. Okay, let's switch that off. And I'll work on that in a minute. Let me read the notice and I'll do roll call for you. The meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for the continued government operations during COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of City Council and other boards will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and the members of the public can view the meeting at www.fallschurchva.gov/council meetings. City Council work sessions are conducted to allow council members to discuss upcoming legislation and policy issues, and the public is not generally invited to speak. However, public comment may be sent to cityclerk@fallschurchva.gov. All comments are provided in full to the members of City Council and will be summarized at the next regular meeting. And Mayor, if I may note before the roll call, March 8th will be a public hearing for the noise code amendment that you'll be discussing momentarily. And any public that wishes to speak at that public hearing can sign up off of the website or also email cityclerk@fallschurchva.gov. And with that, for roll call, let me ask for Ms. Connolly.
Here.
Mr. Duncan.
Yes, I'm here.
Ms. Hardy.
Here.
Ms. Sean Siscott.
Here.
Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Here.
Mr. Snyder.
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And again, good evening to all. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our first item on the agenda is an update regarding our library, which I've walked by many times and looks like nice progress is being made, but let's hear officially. Mr. Shields, is Lionel going to be presenting the update, or who's going to be handling that?
Yes.
As well.
Oh, well, good evening, everybody. And yes, I'm very pleased to introduce Lionel Millard, who's our project manager for the library project, and he's been doing a very excellent job in managing this project. So we'll get his report. I'll also note that our Director of Library, Jenny Carroll, is also on the call, and both of them can answer any questions that you have. So let me turn it over to Mr. Millard.
Thank you, Wyatt. Good evening, everyone. Cindy, are you going to share the presentation that I can read off of? Hello?
There it is. It's on the screen.
Yeah, my apologies. We are having a little audio trouble on the live stream, so it's being looked at, but we are recording.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Am I able to proceed?
It looks that way.
Yes, please proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. So, good evening. So the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library project is well underway. We're about 57% complete with the project so far, as many of you have noticed. Well, can we go to the next slide? As many of you have noticed, we've gotten the structure completely sealed in. The new brick is up, the windows are going in, the roof is complete, the RTUs are set, and the waterproofing membrane is all complete for the exterior work. Centennial is well underway. On the interior, painting, hanging ceiling tile, installing light gauge metal framing. And their goal is to be able to start doing the finishes such as flooring, the bathroom fixtures, and the light fixtures within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Those durations will probably take about a month or two. And I can get a little bit more into that when I talk about schedule, but first I will go into the project budget. So I tried to keep this as simple and straight to the point as possible. I provided the three main points that I think focus the majority of the project funding and what indicates the project being on budget and on time. For the first part is the owner contingency. So during the GMP negotiations in my original presentations last year, we were able to get about 5% of the total GMP amount of $313,000 to be used as the owner contingency. To date, this also includes the owner contingency amount that I was able to get through savings through my negotiations with my vendors. That's separate from the subcontractors in Centennial. So this is like ECS, for instance, my special inspections, Brinjack, my commissioning agent, and other vendors that work directly for me. We were able to actually obtain $380,000, or well, it was $427,000, but we've used some of it thus far. So now I have $380,000 left. So that's inclusive of both owner contingency that was given to me through the 5% of the original budget, plus the additional amount of money that I was able to save through negotiations with my vendor. And then used to date, we've used about $167,000 of the owner contingency. And this is obviously, since we're getting closer to the end of the project, as I said in my LOC meeting update, we are starting to take care of some items that we weren't expected to be able to take care of before the project got started. But since we are doing so well with the owner contingency, we're going to go ahead and take care of some of these outstanding items, such as bathrooms that were originally not going to be replaced. We're actually going to demo them completely now, retile them, provide new fixtures, new vanities, new operable partitions. So the bathrooms will be brand new. There were some ceilings in the lower level that were in the staff office areas that weren't anticipated to be taken care of in this project. But again, since we had the funding, we went ahead and we're going to address these items as well. Another item that I know that indicates a healthy budget is my CM contingency amount, which again was also 5%. Or 5% of the overall GMP amount Centennial, which gave about $313,000 as my original budget item. The current budget for this is about $303,000. And again, this is a testament to Centennial doing a very, very, very good job with their buyouts and their subcontractors. So the way that works, for those of you who don't know, is that the CM contingency, when Centennial went to buy out all the various subcontractors and their scopes. We're talking about 32 different subcontractors on the project. The budgeted amount was what I went to council, or what I went to you guys with last year. This is how much money I need to get the project done per my negotiation with Centennial. Well, they came back, bought out all their subcontractors, and realized that they had a significant amount of savings. So that was put back into the CM contingency amount. And my far right column, the use to date of the $152,000, that's been expensed so far from the CM contingency. So again, we had about $450,000 at one point in the CM contingency budget. And that was also due to some credits that we got as well, such as the water line that we were originally going to replace. We did some further investigating on it once construction started, and it actually turned out that we didn't have to replace that. So that gave us back about $30,000. And then the hard costs. So the original budget was $7,553,000. And the current budget is at $7,933,000. And we've paid out about $4.5 million thus far. I actually just got a recent pay application since this project update, since I did this presentation. And so that brought us up to about 65% complete. But as of today, we're about $5 million of a total budget expense on the hard costs. Does anyone have any questions about the budget right now?
Any questions? All right.
And then, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Duncan.
I just got to know from somebody saying that they're not picking up the audio of this presentation out there in listener land. As Cindy had mentioned something about audio problems. Just wanted to flag that.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Yes, FCC TV and our IT staff are trying to problem solve right now.
Okay.
Well, let me ask the city attorney, are we getting audio out right now or not?
No audio. It's
Is-
being recorded, but it's not,
Is there closed captioning?
closed captioning is on.
So the words are being shown, but that's on the live feed. And there's also cable. Is cable broadcasting this?
The
Cable
person
is,
who texted me said cable wasn't working.
So let me ask the city attorney, does that present issues with this public hearing proceeding?
It does, in that there's not public access now to the hearing. Although, if there is, I'd have to look at the facts. If indeed there's closed captioning so that someone can see, even if they can't hear what is being said. But I think the other question is that if we could solve it quickly, we should probably wait until.
yeah, I'm gonna go on mute and go to the TV room and see what I can find from the controller.
Okay.
All right, so let's just take, I mean, I don't see how we can, based on what you've just said, how we can conduct business right now. And so I suggest we take a 5-minute recess and reevaluate what's
Yeah.
going on afterwards. The city attorney, do you agree?
Yes, I think that would be best.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute recess and then reevaluate. We'll come back in at, let's call it 7:47, and then figure out where we are and if we need additional time. But let's try to get this solved and move on here. But anyway, 7:47, we'll reconvene.
Thank you, Mayor. We're researching the issue.
All right, it's 7:47. Cindy, do you have an update?
Yes, Mayor, we're working on it, but not solved yet. The city clerk is calling Granicus. That's the issue for the audio to live stream. We just got confirmation. We have audio and visual on Verizon, and we are showing closed captioning. If you could give us a few more minutes, please.
All right, so let's say 7:50. That's 3 minutes from now. We'll reconvene. 7:50.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hi, this is Celeste. I am doing an audio check with Granicus. If anybody wants to chime in. We are doing an audio check with our live feed.
Hey, Celeste, this is Cindy helping you on your audio check.
Doing an audio check with Granicus.
Exactly.
Celeste, Jim Snyder, I can hear you.
Okay, Celeste, I had you.
Oh, thank
just
you.
muted
Going
on the
offline.
phone.
All right, it's 7:50. What's the latest?
Celeste was just on and she's apparently discussing it with the people at Granicus, so she may have something in a minute or two, I don't know.
Yeah, so if we could try another minute or two, Mayor, I have gotten confirmation from one of our citizens.
We have a tech
that
from
there's
Colorado
audio.
checking out our system. So
What's that? What
tonight,
confirmation?
hopefully we'll get things moving.
What confirmation did you receive from a citizen, Celeste?
This
Excuse
was
me?
Cindy,
Oh.
and we have audio and visual on Verizon. And that we should also have it on RCM, but I haven't been able to physically confirm that. And anybody on Granicus is getting closed captioning plus the PowerPoint. So if
Okay.
we can give Celeste a moment or two, they were doing an audio check with Granicus.
All right. And while we're waiting, I'll ask the city attorney, what is the requirement for proceeding?
The requirement is a general one that there be public access to the meeting. And so, I mean, obviously, some people could see it through Verizon, but if they can't hear what people are saying from the live stream, I think it's very questionable whether there is public access, whether it's sufficient.
Based on what you just heard, though, it sounds like we do have public access. I know we're trying to get a little bit more, but from what we just
Well,
heard.
Well, people who have Verizon cable would be able to listen to it, but it isn't really out there for the general public. That's what the live stream really does. So if we can get that hooked up with Granicus, I mean, I think we're close.
Well, what we had with Granicus was a closed captioning.
Closed captioning, yeah.
Which would be sufficient, wouldn't it?
I don't know the answer to that 100%, but I should think it could be sufficient, yes.
Everybody's
we could
reading your
rely on
discussion
that.
on closed caption right now, y'all, so.
What's that?
Everybody is reading your discussion on closed caption, and we still are waiting for a response from our team. And
all right, why don't we take another 3-minute break
thank you.
Reconvene at 7:55.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, so we do have full audio and video capacity on all cable and everything right now. Is that right?
Yes, sir, as well as closed captioning.
Okay, well, first off, our apologies to all our viewers and folks who are watching or attempting to watch this wherever you might be. We're very sorry for some technical difficulties. I would ask that we make darn sure this doesn't happen again. This is the second time this has happened in about a month. And I know you all did some checks this afternoon, but whatever it is, let's make sure we have this taken care of for next week. But let's go ahead and get started. Lionel, you were in the middle of your presentation. I think because the public apparently wasn't able to hear all of it, I would ask you just to very briefly summarize what you had said at the beginning of the meeting about the budget, and then let's pick up some speed and get through this.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I will start from the top. So as you can see in front of you, yes, the project budget, the owner contingency, I was given 5% at the beginning of the project at $313,000. I currently have $380,000 in the owner contingency pot. And the reason why it's higher than the original budget is because of buyout savings on the owner's side through savings through our vendors when we negotiated their subcontracts. So that's where I am with the owner contingency. I've expended about $167,000 of that thus far. Same with the CM contingency, I had 5%. That's what the $313,000 is. We have about $303,000 remaining with $152,000 expended. The reason why we have so much CM contingency remaining is because of the buyout savings that Centennial was able to conduct through their subcontractor buyouts, which netted them about $157,000 in addition to the $313,000 we originally had.
Lionel, if I could interrupt you for just a second. I just got an email message from a constituent that there is no sound online. There's no sound online, only sound through FiOS TV. Can we confirm that there's sound very quickly?
It could still be a delay. Because
yes,
there a couple minute delay?
Yeah, we have confirmed with on-site at City Hall, Granicus through phones. There is a delay and somebody may need to also refresh.
All right. Thank you very much. So again, that word out to everyone, you may need to refresh if you have no sound. If you're watching at home and not maybe just on closed caption, please try to refresh your browser.
Cox audio and video are working here at the house.
Okay. All
I
right.
just confirmed Verizon's good also.
All right, Mr. Millard, continue.
Okay. So 7.5 was the original hard cost budget for Centennial's construction cost. The 7.9 is just that CM contingency amount of $313,000 added to that 7.5 million. That's where the 7.9 comes for. And to date, we've expensed about $4.5 million, which puts us at about 57% complete through construction. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have gotten another pay application for about another $600,000. That puts us at about 65% complete. But that's still being processed, so that's why that's not being reflected in this update. And so, yeah, that's where we are with the budget. I think we have about $500,000 left between the two contingency pots. And then, again, I want to add the CM contingency at the end of the project is split 80-20 between the city and the contractor, meaning the city gets 80%, Centennial will receive 20% of whatever is remaining of the CM contingency amount. So that's the project budget update. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so Letty's got a question. I'm going to ask one real quick before we get to Letty. The bottom line is, are we on time and on budget right now?
Yes, we are.
All right, that sounds good. I like it. Ms. Hardy, then Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, Lionel. So make sure I'm understanding. So the original budget was 7.5. It's grown to 7.9 because people did a good job negotiating subcontractors and we were able to add the savings into the budget.
Correct. Centennial's buyout with the subcontractors, any savings that was recognized is in the contract value with them. So that is absorbed back into the same contingency amount. That's why it's so high.
And so the savings just don't get refunded back. It gets split in that 80-20 split that you talked about.
Oh, no, it will. That's what, yeah, no, it will. We've expensed $152,000 of CM contingency. But if you take that expense and put it back into the original budget, we had $450,000 of CM contingency. And that's all in that project budget. And if we did not spend $152,000, then we would have got 80% of that. But now we'll only get 80% of the $303,000 to date. Obviously, the project has 2.5 months left. So there's a chance that more CM contingency can be expensed by the project. But again, I mean, that's something we won't know until the end when it's all said and done, how much we'll exactly have left.
Okay. I was going to ask that given where the project is about having half the contingency left on par with what you would expect?
I would have expected us to use more because I didn't know that they were going to do such a good job with their buyouts. So I would have expected to be, I mean, if we're 57%, I mean, if you think of it as a bell curve, I would have expected us to be about 50% expense to the CM contingency.
Okay. And again, because we did a good job, or people did a good job negotiating those subcontractors, that's why you were looking at being able to renovate other things in the library that weren't originally in scope?
That's kind of right. So the CM contingency, I can't use that for things that I intentionally add to the project scope. For instance, like the staffs, the ceilings in the staff areas, or the bathrooms that were existing to remain, but the condition of those bathrooms are pretty poor after they demoed out the toilets and the sinks and everything. I mean, it looks old, it's dirty. So I was like, this needs to be replaced. If we have the money and the budget to do it, which we do, but that's coming out of owner contingency, not CM contingency. I can't dictate the use of CM contingency. The
How much owner contingency are we using to add those new scope items?
So the bathroom is actually $28,000. The ceilings were about $17,000, and there's a bunch of other miscellaneous, like minor items that we will be doing. But the bathrooms themselves are probably the biggest item at $28,000. There's 2 of them.
Okay. Do we have anything else that you envision being able to do or plan to do with the savings there?
Another one of the items that we're going to do that wasn't included in the original scope was some ADA push button operators. So per code, they're not required. And since we were looking at a pretty tight budget, the architect said, let's not do these because we need to keep the budget at a reasonable number. But now that we are where we are going to do that. That's probably going to cost me anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 to do those. Let me think off the top of my head. I mean, that's really the only 2 bigger items. I mean, there's some floors and some ceilings, like I mentioned earlier, that I would like to do that are going to cost me around 10 or 15 grand as well. There's a thermal counter that's probably like $1,000 that I'm going to end up doing. And there's some miscellaneous things with the AV system in the large and medium meeting room. It's like this mixer that was not part of the original plan to do, but we wanted to operate similar to Dogwood Conference Room in City Hall, which is where you have a single point source that distributes the like presentations or PowerPoints or whatever to all monitors in the room instead of just one. So it's more of a technical thing, and Jamal's been helping me with it, but it's something that we want. It's the goal of our meeting rooms to do something like that. So that's why I'm doing it.
Got it. So to summarize, make sure I'm understanding, because there's a lot of technical detail there, that you're able to add some small scope items into the project, but still stay under the budget that we originally approved.
Correct.
Thank you. That's it for now.
No problem. And I'd also like to add too that owner contingency is also the funding that comes whenever work is added that is a completely new scope work for the contractor. And you got to remember, since this is an existing building, there, like once you started to demo and put things back together, obviously you have some unforeseen conditions that arise that weren't accounted for in any of the drawings. that money or those items are also pulled out of the owner contingency too.
All right, thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Sure, I guess my request is that all or part of the savings go back into the city's revenues so that we can offset other costs that taxpayers will have to cover. So that's a request that I would like on the record. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Please proceed. Is that the end of your presentation or do you have more? Okay.
I got a quick question, Dave.
Yeah, Ross?
Hey, Lionel, if the contingencies that were budgeted weren't spent, bottom line, where do you expect to end up?
Owner contingency, I would expect the majority of that to be used. Only reason why I say that is because like once we're done with the project, like there's paving on the exterior. Like for instance, the plans only call for the entrance, the front entrance and the side entrance to be paved. Well, the construction has not torn up, but it's definitely in worse shape than what it originally was prior to construction. So that's going to all be repaved. Obviously, if there's stuff like the staff lounge area, there's cabinets in there that are very old and could be replaced to give them a little bit better functioning equipment and refrigerators and stuff like that. So I would expect of that $380,000. I mean, it's going to probably be depleted a good amount. And again, none of this stuff is like wish list items. It's stuff that should be done.
Sure.
But we would have done had the budget been,
It's things that you made a judgment call based on the conditions that were unforeseen in the plans, correct?
Correct. And
Okay.
a lot of these, yes. And a lot of the
sorry, go ahead.
I'm about to say a lot of the items, like I see them at the beginning of the project, but I didn't do anything to them because I was like, I need to make sure that I have money to cover the unforeseen stuff. But again, now that we're, 3/4 of the way through the project, or almost 3/4 of the way through the project, I'm feeling more comfortable releasing some of that funds to take care of some of those other items.
Okay. So bottom line, you expect most of the most of the savings going to come from the unused CM contingency, our percentage share of that?
Wait, say that one more time?
So the CM contingency, you expect for this some to be left over there, correct?
I don't want to make any promises, but that is the plan. Yes.
So our savings would be our percentage of what we get out of that unused CM contingency?
Yes, we get 80% of whatever's left of that $303,000.
So that's really the savings over the original budget?
Yeah. Well, the owner contingency additions was savings as well, but the CM contingency savings was what was in the contract with Centennial. The owner contingency is actual recognized savings in the project budget.
Okay, so bottom line, what do you expect? So it sounds like there are savings. So for the general public that's listening here, if people were to go back and look at what was approved for the project, what are you expecting the savings to come back to the city to be?
Like you want a dollar number?
Yeah. Ballpark, and I'm not going to hold you to that.
I'll say $200,000.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously that is good news, Lionel. There are $200,000, and yeah, I would agree with Councilman Snyder that if there's money left over, let's put it back into savings to benefit the taxpayers. So Lionel, thanks for your stewardship of this project. That is a bright spot of news here. Let's hopefully keep on track with that.
Will do. Thank you. And then I just had some quick budget points here. So we have 63 potential change orders that were issued. So this is, again, where the money is going with the CM contingency and owner contingency. I didn't obviously list out every single change order. But again, I think that's actually pretty healthy because as you can see, the lower down in my quick points, 1.32% has been added to the GMP cost through owner contingency. And of those 63 change orders, they were all bundled up in packages and issued to the contractor through 20 separate change orders. And again, some of these had credits in them, so it wasn't all expenses. And then let's see here, fixtures. So we've already got our FF&E in production. That was about $700,000. $730,000. And yeah, I mean, that's really it for the budget.
All right,
So-
thank you very much. Is the library director here with us? And would she like to add anything to your presentation? Thank you for that. It's good. And we're all glad to hear it's on time and on budget. When, speaking of which, when do you anticipate both substantial completion and being open to the public?
So substantial completion is currently, so substantial completion is currently scheduled at May 15th, 2021. Obviously they have a month to get to final completion, which would be June 15th, 2021. And then I would say about 3 to 4 weeks after that is when we'd be open to the public, because once we get final completion, that's when on the city's end, we have to do all of our moving and all our coordination and set up our IT network and putting books back on the shelves and everything. So we have to have time in order to get ourselves ready to be open to the public. But really quickly, as you can see with the schedule, so the original substantial completion date was April 13th, 2021. That's been extended by about 32 days. This has all been due to inclement weather. So per the contract, there's a certain set of days or a certain number of days every month that they have built into the schedule that they are not allowed to claim due to adverse weather. Once they reach that limit, any day that they receive over 1/10 of an inch of rain at Reagan National Airport, they can claim that as a weather delay day. And so we broke down the schedule, where these additional days have come from. And obviously, like August, for instance, it was a very brutal summer, June, July, and August to be exact, really just poured on the rain. And given the site limitations, we couldn't really do anything with the mud and all the muck that was on the site. So we kind of had to wait and sit until that stuff dried out. But again, they only got 1 day for every date or for every day that they received any type of precipitation over 1/10 of an inch. And this is one of the things where it's constantly evolving. And obviously, every month they have a critical path item that has to be met. Right now, we're currently in a critical item for the exterior site work because that's one of the items that are still remaining, such as the brick pavers, the concrete mud bat, the stairs, the bioretention pond. All that's on their critical path right now. Last month, we were killed with water or with rain. So there is a chance that they can claim more days. Actually, it's not a chance they will. I know they will because they already have. I'm currently reviewing it to see how many days they're actually entitled to. But again, per the contract, they are entitled to days. And once they provide the documentation in the backup, I review it and I give them however many days I feel that they are justified. So the schedule, again, this is something that is still moving a little bit. I will have more information hopefully in the next week or two, but I would expect that substantial completion date and that final completion date to be pushed back again. How many days? I'm not really sure. It could be 3, it could be 12. I don't expect it to be more than 12, but again, we'll see once I'm done with my review. And
all right. And so are you anticipating right now a grand, opening somewhere in mid-July, or is it after that?
I would say that's safe to say mid-July would be about right.
Okay. All right, Mr. Duncan, you've got a question, and then back to Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Lionel. Great work. So I've listened into your monthly library oversight committee meetings where any question that I might think of, and many I haven't, have been answered. I just want to offer one perspective on the financial situation we find ourselves in, which is to say that I would like to rely on your professional judgment in terms of how to allocate whatever we might have in the way of surplus, if we call it that. I think it's important that we, outfit and finish the building in a manner that, will stand up the test of time and won't have us coming back 2 or 3 years later saying, gee, if we'd only spent, another $500, we could add better AV in this room or whatever. I'm sure you can think of 20 things that would improve the functionality of the building and really set us up with a facility that, serves the public very well. And, rather than just, from my perspective, say, whatever you manage to say, we want it back. I would at least like us to have a discussion about whether we would deploy some of that surplus into, finishes on the building that will make it something that we can all be proud of and something that the citizens can get the maximum use out of. Specifically, and this, in some respects is not really related to the library, but at the last Oversight Committee meeting, there was a discussion about, the exterior plantings, I think, around the perimeter of the building. And, do we have the budget to do proper tree wells? We spend an inordinate amount of time, with streetscape issues and other developments. I think it would be very important for us at this building to, do a good job around the perimeter of it, make sure that trees get planted that have a chance at surviving and becoming mature trees, because, that communicates our values as a community, as well as, the quality of the inside of the building. So I just wanted to throw that in. And, I don't know if you've been able to get any more information on that question about the tree wells and so forth, but I'd be interested at least in hearing a little bit more about that, as we get closer to the point where we're finished. Thanks.
All right. I would echo Mr. Duncan's comments and concerns about just doing it right, and making it look nice and finishing up right. Anyway, Ms. Hardy, you've got another comment?
Yes, I was going to say something similar because I think Wyatt had made a promise that he was never going to come back to us within the next 10 or 15 years to touch the library. So let's do this right. My other question was actually about the library opening. So while none of us actually have a crystal ball to predict where COVID will head, but after substantial completion or the final completion, do we anticipate that we'll actually be able to open the library to the public with whatever COVID protocol we think will be in place?
Yes.
And kind of limited capacity or reservation system, or what's your thinking?
So that would be the crystal ball. We are consulting with the architects on a COVID safe reopening plan. So it could be anything from what we're currently doing, although I very much would like to open the building. And I anticipate that we will be well into vaccines. I don't think we'll have herd immunity by that time, but I think a substantial number of people will be vaccinated. So it could be express pickup where people could come into the building, doing tours so that people could come into the building. And then along the spectrum, everything from having the building open, people can browse, to then opening seating, opening conference rooms, starting programming. So we will have the spectrum in front of us. And then depending on what happens in the next, 3 to 4 months, we'll determine where we land on that spectrum.
Great, thank you. I know that the community is eagerly waiting for it, especially because I think we're one of the few library systems that may actually be able to reopen. Thanks.
Sure.
All right. So Lionel, I imagine your portion of this presentation is over. Ms. Carroll, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I think that Lionel is doing a great job on this project, and I've been really pleased doing the walkthroughs that I've had with him on the site, the discussions that we have, how we're moving along. I know that you all will have an opportunity to have a tour this Wednesday. If you're not able to attend, don't worry, we will have more tours further along in the project. Overall, I'm really happy, and I'm really happy the windows are going in. It's starting to look like a building.
Yeah, it looks great from the outside. I walk by all the time. I'm very excited. I imagine most of our constituents are as well. And the timing of everything seems to have coincided with the time when we would have limited availability anyway. So anyway, but we're all looking forward to the opening, and wish you well and Godspeed getting this thing done. So thank you very much. Are there any last questions before we move on to the next item? All right, Mr. Shields, let's move on to the West Falls Church project update.
Thank you, Mayor. For tonight's presentation, we will start off with Carly Aubrey will just walk us through a couple of the key items in our staff review. And we do have the development team. We're excited to have them on this call. They will go through, I think, a good presentation just to get the council reacquainted with the site plan for this project. And I will just say that it's, as we've gone through COVID, it is really great to be at this point. The development team has been very committed to keeping the program together. even in a world that has been changing under our feet. And so we're very pleased with that, and hope to have a very constructive review of this SESP. Tonight, we want to do the presentation to the City Council. We'll have a town hall meeting tomorrow at noon. Ms. Aubrey will speak a little bit more about that as well. And we are going to touch base with all the boards and commissions, and we will be asking council for final consideration of the special exception site plan on May 10th is the schedule that we've laid out to get thorough public input and comment in time for council's final consideration there at your first regular meeting in May. Ms. Aubrey, if you'd like to give the staff report, and then we'll turn it over to the Falls Church Gateway Partners for their presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Shields. So City Council tonight is requested to hold a work session and discuss and provide comments on the second submissions of the application to amend the previously approved special exception entitlement and the application for a special exception site plan for phase 1 of the proposed West Falls Economic Development Project. The applications were originally submitted on June 10th, 2020, and second submissions were received on January 19th of 2021. The proposed project is a mixed-use development project adjacent to the city's new high school and within walking distance to West Falls Church Metro Station. It'd be comprised of several buildings, a walkable grid of streets, and a central open space, constructed in 2 phases. And the current 9.45 acre economic development portion of the site is located on property that became part of the city through the 2013 boundary adjustment agreement with Fairfax County. And the SCE does propose a new total acreage parcel of approximately 9.78 acres. And the approximate acreage for the phase 1 portion is 8.83 acres. The 9.45 acre site was conveyed from the school board to the city in August of 2019, and a comprehensive agreement between the city and Falls Church Gateway Partners was signed on June 12th. And there have been proposed amendments to the CA, which were authorized by the City Council, and those were to include or provide for a delay in the project delivery of date of approximately 6 months and economic changes, which are summarized in the fiscal impact section of the staff report. So I'm going to go through some of the key changes from the approved SCE and then some of the changes from the first submission of these applications and the second submission, this current submission. So in terms of the SCE changes, the current development proposal includes an adjustment to the overall parcel boundary and the phase 1 boundary. As I mentioned, the adjustment to the overall parcel boundary is to add approximately 1/3 acres in the southwest corner of the site. And within this proposed new parcel boundary, an amendment to the phase 1 boundary is requested to accommodate changes in building orientation in blocks B1 and B2. A separate subdivision application has been submitted for a lot line adjustment for this request, and that application is under staff review and would require approval of the subdivision, a resolution to acquire the land, and land transfer agreement between the city and the school board. Other modifications are to some of the proposed uses. The first one is to the civic space requirements. The original comprehensive agreement and approved SCE included a minimum of 20,000 square feet of civic space with approximately 8,000 to 12,000 event space with a 4,000 square foot outdoor rooftop terrace and an additional 4,000 to 8,000 square feet to be occupied by performing arts or education studio. The first submission of the SCE amendment and SESP phase 1 applications proposed 17,000 square feet for the civic space with 5,000 to 6,000 square feet of event space and conference space to be in the phase 1 office building, 4,000 square foot outdoor space to be located in the commons, and 6,000 to 14,000 square feet education art space in the phase 1 condo building. The second submission, the current submission of the SCE amendment and Phase 1 applications proposes 13,000 square feet with the conference room space and the education art space located within the condo building in Block C, and then the outdoor event space to be located in the Commons. In addition to the other uses, request is to include uses which were not explicitly listed in the approved SEE and may not be allowed by right in B2. And if you recall, in January, the City Council adopted ordinance number 2021 to allow City Council to consider uses not allowed by right as part within B2 as part of an SEE. So this they are requesting that as part of this application. And it is anticipated that some of those requested commercial uses not allowed in B2, such as the daycare, bowling, and pet services, would occupy areas designated as ground floor retail on the site plan. There are proposed changes to some of the general building locations, specifically in blocks B1 through B4 and garage D2. And these changes resulted in change to the street layout and primarily to street A between blocks in AD, which are now split into streets B and C. And then alley 1, which was open air alley in block A, is now enclosed, and an open air alley is now shown in block D. And there is also the addition of lane 4 between the new high school plaza and the proposed condominium building in block C. Additionally, the current applications depict a revised intersection design based on coordination with VDOT and Fairfax County for the Route 7, Commons Drive, and Chestnut Street intersection. And that was submitted as part of an updated transportation impact analysis and signal justification report. And this intersection design and signal has been approved by VDOT. In terms of phasing, the development team is requesting that the senior housing parcel be bifurcated from the remainder of the Phase 1 SESP to accommodate the needs of the senior housing development partner. This separate SESP submission and building delivery would follow this process by a few months. In terms of voluntary concessions, there are some changes proposed to the adopted SCE VCs. One is to incorporate 3,000 square foot meeting conference space from the hotel into the Civic Space, and then amend the Civic use square footage and composition as I just described, and then amend the VC for the requirement that owners not receive permits for the last 100,000 square feet of residential use until above ground construction has started on each of the office and hotel components of Phase 1. This has been requested to be amended to that the final CO for the building, a residential apartment building, would not be released until release of a building permit for any of the non-residential or senior housing uses. And then the last one is the addition of permitted uses not listed in the B2 district. These are all the VCs for the SCE amendment, and the SESP are under review by staff currently. In terms of some additional project changes from the first submission to now, in addition to the intersection that I just mentioned on Route 7, there are some changes to the streetscape width along Route 7 in Haycock, and these are also based on changes to the site design to accommodate future traffic impacts. Along Route 7 within Block A, there's an approximately 10-foot reduction in the streetscape width. However, the minimum width would still be the minimum 20 feet width, which is consistent with streetscape standards. In Block B, a bump out has been added at Commons Drive and Route 7, and the remainder of that streetscape has a minimum width of 20 feet. Along Haycock Road, primarily in Block D3, which is the future Phase 2 condominium building block, there is a request to maintain a minimum of 9 feet clear space with a total setback from face of curb of 16.75 feet. The bike lanes along Commons Drive have been moved from being on the inside adjacent to the Commons to being on the outside, in between the travel lanes and on-street parking. And this is based on conversations with Fairfax County and the anticipated continuation of Commons Drive to the West Falls Church Metro Station. There's been some changes to architectural elevation modifications and the pedestrian via between blocks A and D, but I'll defer that update to the applicant because I know they have some nice renderings to go along with that discussion. Just a couple other things. The parking variance for block C1, the condominium building was granted by the BZA in January. And that was specifically to allow some columns within 3 feet of the drive aisle and to allow for tandem spaces. And then, as I mentioned, the SEE code update in January, which as I mentioned, would provide council discretion to consider uses not otherwise allowed by right within the B2 district, as long as they contribute significant net benefits, revenue benefits, build community, and meet goals of the district. Last one's the civic uses, which I discussed. The staff report also has an analysis of this project against the comprehensive plan, the SEE code, the SESP code, and then some key staff comments, which I'll summarize quickly. Continued recommendations to further improve the massing and perceived elevation on Block A, suggestions to improve the level of design quality for the B2 hotel building to be consistent with other parts of the project, justification for the variations from the streetscape. In addition to some of the width reductions, there's some of the tree planters are combined to hold more than one tree, which, while not consistent with streetscape standards, they have in meetings provided good justification for that, but we just need to have it included in the application. And then improve upon some of the energy and atmosphere points in the preliminary lead scorecards, particularly for the hotel and office buildings, and increased transportation demand management and monitoring for throughout the build out of the entire project and for a few years after that, after completion. Fiscal impacts, the staff and applicant are meeting to discuss some of the details, and then we will be able to provide an updated fiscal impact analysis. And then in terms of schedule, as Mr. Shields mentioned, there's a town hall meeting tomorrow. There will be meetings with the Planning Commission, School Board, EDA, and then a Planning Commission recommendation hearing on April 7th. An additional City Council work session in April and public hearing on May 10th is scheduled for now. So with that, I can take any questions, and the applicant is here to provide updated slides and presentation on the applications.
So why don't we hold off questions until we hear from the applicant? I got to say, you went through an awful lot of stuff, and it's fairly hard to follow, particularly if you can't see visuals at the same time. And there's a lot to go through. So I would just suggest we hold off questions for the moment to see what the applicant has to say, and then we can get into it. With that, Evan, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Evan's here, and you get, this is Laura Schoenfeld from Hoffman. Robin is here too, but I will be presenting with Evan. So yes, we are here to bring all the pretty pictures to all the things that Carly just told you.
Great. Well, we look forward to hearing from you, and I think we'll have a fair amount of questions, but let's get started. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah, and thank you, Carly. That was a great, very detailed overview, kind of a roadmap of where we've been and where we're going. So the good news is what we're presenting to all of you tonight is quite similar to what we presented to you about 2 months ago, just with some better visuals and some changes that we made to one of the buildings. So hopefully it'll feel familiar. But just to reorient you, this is of course a rendering looking at the commons and the architecture of the building surrounding the commons, with the condo building on the right, the hotel building in the middle, the office building in the distance, and then on the left side of the street will be the senior housing and the residential. But the key element that we've always talked about for this project was a great enlivened and exciting active central spine with, you can see it here with fire pit and ping pong tables and outdoor green space in the distance, hidden by beautiful trees, which of course is great. And then some retail kiosks as well. So, and then on the ground plane, you can see this wonderful festive retail storefronts that really lighten and brighten the street and make it a safe and active place. And go to the next slide. This is a view now down in the commons. So we're standing right in front of the ping pong table and fire pit area with our backs to that and looking towards the green. On the right, you can see these swings that overlook the open space, which will be fun for kids during the daytime and adults in the evening. And then you're also seeing that the green space is largely relatively flat and also fairly unprogrammed. So we can have furniture there, we can have events there, we can do larger events there, we can do yoga night, movie night. We purposely left it flexible. The architecture of the building you're seeing here, very similar to what we had shared with you last time from this view, because that view was something that we've gotten positive feedback on. But you're seeing this concept in most of our buildings here that have a kind of gray tone and white palette. So anything from different levels of white all the way through gray and metal color. But there's on almost every building, there's a pop of color. And in this case, you're seeing these really cool red balconies and red window mullions as well. And that adds a little bit of color and fun to this building. Let me just go to the next slide.
Sorry, Evan, I'll just add, but we're getting a lot of our color and influence from this retail band and different pieces of art and things like that that'll be in the commons. So we wanted to make sure that the buildings all felt like they had their own personalities, but that it was kind of a cohesive palette that then we could bring kind of more festive atmosphere on top of. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, that was perfect. And now we're looking at the hotel. This image is actually an image you guys sorry, I shouldn't say guys. All of you had seen at the last meeting. So the hotel entrance is right in the center of the block. And then you have a mixture of color on the building as well. And then, of course, as Laura was just talking about, this awesome kind of enlivened and colorful retail base as well. So next slide. So this was our first submission. And what you'll see in a moment is some of our changes. So let's go to the next slide and then I can come back to this. There we go. So the key changes here, and now let's flip back. Sorry. Just go back one slide. Yeah. Okay, there we go. So if you focus on the bottom of the plan, you can see how the intersection, when we submitted our initial first SESP back in the spring, we weren't sure how that intersection was going to be resolved. And so we were showing Chestnut where it sits today, and we were showing this angled intersection that was getting as close to Chestnut as possible. And that's something we had thought VDOT and FCDOT might support, but ultimately did not. And so that's one area that has changed. A second area that has changed is Street C. One of the requests was to make sure that the accessibility for those in wheelchairs is as elegant and exciting as those who are walking up a staircase, and we'll show you that in a moment, because that has changed. We heard commentary on the architecture of Block A, which you'll see some new renderings on how that wraps the corner and breaks into multiple building types. And those are kind of the key plan-oriented changes. We can go to the next slide. So now you can see how that intersection gets resolved. I'll show a little bit more detail on that in a moment, but essentially Chestnut Street closes and no longer connects to Route 7, but a new curb cut is created directly across the street into the shopping center. And that allows for a traffic light with a perfect four-way intersection to be created in that entrance to the project. We've executed an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the tenant across the street on the work that is intended to be done. And that site plan process will go through Fairfax County to get approval for that new design. But as Carly said, VDOT and FCDOT have now supported that intersection, and VDOT has approved it, which is fantastic news for the city and creates this great spine street coming out of Route 7. Go to the next slide.
Very zoomed in.
Is very zoomed in. Sorry. Yeah, is there any way to zoom out a bit? Negative, not a plus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Sorry, this one's, I guess, out of size.
Perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's an 11 by 17 sheet, I realize now. Okay, so as you're looking at the intersection, this is what we were just talking about. So the areas in green end up being closed. That's where Chestnut Street currently goes through. And because Chestnut Street essentially will become a hammerhead at the end there, where cars can still turn around and come out, but there'll be an easement through the shopping center that will allow cars to access the traffic light as well. So what this does, it's actually a pretty novel traffic calming measure where the various internet sites Waze and other Google Maps that typically would direct you to take Chestnut Street as a cut around to get away from the Haycock intersection, those won't function because you're going to go through a private shopping center easement. But for residents that live in the neighborhood, they'll at least know that they can get in and out of the neighborhood safely and, quite frankly, get an improved access because they'll be able to make a left turn to go towards Tyson's. But at the same time, it allows access to still continue for the shopping center, which was really critical to them and for them allowing this approval. And it allows the traffic light to be perfectly aligned. So it's a unique, different improvement, but it is something that not only are we going to be taking that through the site plan, but our team will also have to pay for new stormwater management, for renovations to the shopping center to the south. So there were some costs involved in this as well. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this was the second submission with what we're submitting now for the retail plan. Very similar to what we've always shown you and talked about, where the entire commons is lined with red retail, which is colored in red. And then you can see the grocery store on the bottom right, which we are not able to announce who the tenant is, but we have made a ton of progress in that regard. And the other buildings are very much the same as what we initially submitted, with the office building on the left, with their lobby directly across from the structured parking garage and the hotel lobby mid-block, the condo building on the upper left, senior housing on the right, and then the apartment building on the bottom right. We go from there. Okay, so block A, we'll start there. This was the block that probably got the most attention from an architectural perspective from the council. And so let's dig right in. Go to the next slide. So this was what our initial submission was, and the feedback we had gotten was that the building felt too monotonous, that it was too long, that there wasn't a breakup of facades along the street edge on Route 7. There was a recognition that it is a difficult parcel. There's 20 some odd feet of grade change from Commons down to Haycock, and so it's not easy to come up with a building design that allows you to account for that in a way that's attractive and reasonable and gives you a nice base for all different parts of the building. We still love the traditional concept of this building. We think what it allows is for this transition from Falls Church, which typically has a little bit more traditional architecture, to the modern architecture of the Commons. And so this was our first submission, and then we'll show you, go to the next slide. And so this is where we've ended up based upon the changes, and there's a whole lot of changes here to go through. So number one, we've broken up the massing quite a bit. So you're now seeing a whole number of different facades and building types along Route 7 instead of that one long building. This is actually still red brick in the corner, even though because it's nighttime, it's showing a little bit more pale. But we also modified the heights of the building, not the actual height, but the perceived height, by lowering the brick at the corner and raising
if you're
the brick.
not speaking, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you're not speaking, please mute your. Assume we're getting some background noise. I'm not sure what song that is, but. All right, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I actually was glad you guys were a little late because my son had trumpet lessons and my daughter had karate lessons above me. So if we had started this about 15 minutes earlier, it would have been very loud during this presentation. So anyway, the things that we did here is you can see the second building facade coming in off of Haycock now. That is really the building more in keeping with what we had originally proposed, but we've shortened it and we've raised the roof on that, or raised the palette of that up an entire level all the way to the top of the building. And that break in the facade levels is really what gives people the identity that these feel like different buildings. You can also see that building now sits proud of the corner building. So once again, they feel like they're two buildings, like in many cities, that abut each other. And they will be different colors. So in this rendering, you're not quite seeing the differentiation, but the corner building is a reddish brick, and then the second portion of the building is more of a brownish red brick. As you keep going up the block, it becomes more modern as we start turning the corner on the Commons. You're starting to see the streetscape. You're starting to see how Route 7 becomes and Haycock becomes a more pedestrian-oriented space. You're seeing how the awnings start working. And then we've also added some detail at the very top of the corner building with these cool little eyelets over the windows to add some interest from a distance. Let me go to the next slide. And so this was our first submission for the Commons. So now we're on Route 7 looking up the Commons at that new intersection. And you'll see on the next slide, we've kept the architecture of this because we didn't get negative feedback on that, but we've simplified it a little bit. We've broken up the massing of the buildings so that they each feel like their approximate width of what a building would be. We've once again stepped back that roof level on the third building and pulled out the corner. And so there's a little bit more undulation at the upper level of the building as well. And so now once you go directly from that very traditional architecture we were just showing, and you wrap around the corner into something very modern and very distinct and different. Can you go to the next slide? So now we are down on Haycock and we're looking up the pedestrian passageway towards the Commons. This was a change we had made before we presented to all of you in December, where we pulled back the building from the garage to really open up the corner and celebrate the staircase. You can see the staircase is now pulled proud of the garage and open, so it feels nice and safe and comfortable. And then there's an elevator directly tucked behind that staircase that brings you right up to the via or that open space level. So you no longer have to go through the garage if you are a pedestrian who is unable to walk up the stairs, or if you have a bike or whatever it may be, you'll have the ability to get to an elevator that'll take you up to that plaza. If you look in the upper right image here where those two people are standing, they're basically standing right outside the elevator entry on the left, and that's right at the top of the stairs. So you've come up the stairs, the elevator is directly there, and you can then continue straight all the way through to the Commons, and that is an open air space. You can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Go back. That was the old version that I was showing. This is the new version. So this is the old version, and now the new version. So in the new version, that canopy is actually showing you where the elevator is coming out into the via. So apologize for that. And then you're starting to see as well on the bottom right image, our initial SESP submission, since we didn't have time to focus on the garages, just had plain concrete shown because we hadn't really designed them yet. You're starting to see now the red brick facade surrounding the garage, and you'll see some art locations shortly as well. Let me go to the next slide. This is the first submission in elevation. We don't have to walk through these in detail, but I'll have these here for question and answer. But if you focus on the top one, you can kind of see how we had the modern building on the far left, these little small facades, and then this very long building. If you go to the next image, you can see now it has a more regular rhythm of what you'd see in a city where the buildings are more appropriate widths, the heights are differentiated, the colors are a little bit more differentiated. And so hopefully we've started to achieve some of what you're all looking for. Let me go to the next image. This is the pedestrian via. Once again, I just have this here for informational purposes. If anybody has any questions, you can go to the next slide. And then go to the next slide. Okay. This shows you the path to that elevator. And so why don't we go to the next slide, because that was the first submission. We'll go to the actual new submission. There we go. Perfect. So if you're where I can't show you my mouse, but if you see the word Street C on the upper right of this image, perfect. Thank you, Cindy. So to the south of that, you're seeing the staircase come up to the via. And there's an opening to the left of that staircase. And that opening allows people to walk next to the staircase to where the cursor is. You can see that little square with the triangle in it is the elevator, just beyond there. So you have the daycare entry, and then you have the elevator, and that elevator goes up to the via. So number one, it's open, it's an accessible space. There'll be cars going in and out, not where that is specifically, but around it. So there'll always be eyes on that area for people going to the grocery store. And it's also a heavily trafficked area for people going to pick up and drop off at the daycare. So it'll feel safe and comfortable, and then that takes people up to the via without having to go through the garage. Go to the next slide. This is our ground floor retail area, very consistent with what you've always seen. The bottom left has a little bit of a bump out of retail. It hasn't been decided yet whether we'll build that or not. That'll really be based upon the tenant that we have interested in the corner space. But to the extent there's somebody who wants to do something cool and bump out, we just wanted to show that as a possibility for that space. If not, that'll just be open space or outdoor cafe zone. Let me go to the next slide. And so this is the new submission. You're now seeing the building edge of the retail coming straight down, but we've shown a dashed area where we'd like to be able to add retail to the extent that we find the right type of tenant. There was something done very successfully at Pike and Rose with a restaurant called Summer House, where they did kind of an indoor-outdoor bar that was part of the restaurant and was covered, but had all these windows that could open up and feel like an outdoor space, and it's just been one of the most successful spots in that project. You're also seeing now an entrance to the grocery store mid-block, so we do have the entrance at the bottom right, which is at the corner of Haycock and 7, but you'll notice to the left of the elevators, there's a, not quite that far left, that white, yep, perfect. So you can actually exit the grocery store and walk towards the commons from essentially from the top of the hill. So the escalators and the mid-block entrance all come together at the same point, so everyone enters the grocery at the same area, but you can access it without having to walk all the way down the hill to Haycock. You can go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Laura to talk about the office, and I'll be back at the end for garages.
Great. So the office has changed kind of. We took, again, some of the comments that we got, just like Evan was talking about for the apartment A, and we actually have a development partner that's going to be working with us. It's also not public yet on that piece, but we have been working with them to continue to advance the design per the comments that we received before. So we can look at a couple of the more advanced design changes that have been made. Next slide, please. So you may remember in our first submission, again, like Evan and I were talking about at the beginning of this, this kind of more neutral palettes, but making sure that we are having still visual interest with changes in materials, in ins and outs and all of that, to give some depth to the space. So we took the comments that we got that we need to maybe add a little bit more warmth and a little bit more a little bit more visual interest, and we gave those comments to the development partner, and they've continued to advance that. So let's go to the next slide. So you can see here, there's just a little bit more patterning. There's a little bit more color variation and a little bit more changes in depth that will bring more visual interest to the building to respond to the critique we received last time. If you can go to the next slide. And then we are now looking at the commons facing kind of the entrances mid block to the office. If you'll remember that from our past presentations, the entrance still remains in the same place, but we've rethought the facade on the commons, again, to bring a little bit more visual interest. And they had also wanted to respond to all the bird strike comments that were done about that much glass being shown. So we've kept the same, our development partner has kept the same general idea, but again, added a little bit more patterning, texture, all of that to the building. Next, in the next slide, you can see that. So you still have this covered walkway that's by the cafe zone that leads you to this mid block entrance down the Woonerf. If you remember from our presentations on placemaking, this will be a space that is for cars, but also for people. We'll have lights over and it'll feel very inviting to walk down. But again, you can see kind of that same experience going down the street, but also, again, that a little bit more patterning and a little bit more variation in color on the commons facade. You go to the next slide. This is a view that if you're basically standing with your back to the hotel, looking over the Woonerf south, you're looking at the main facade. And we, in our original design, had, again, that kind of detail above the center entrance to the building. And we've just, our development partner has, again, just kind of updated this look a little bit to match the rest of the facade changes that have been made. So if you go to the second page. Again, you still have that mid-block entrance. It's still very clean, it has a canopy over it, all of that. But again, bringing that patterning and color from the other facades onto this side also. next page. And then this is looking at the south elevation, which is the Route 7 elevation. And again, if you go to the next one, our partner has carried through, again, just breaking things up a little bit more to just make sure it's a little bit more visually interesting while still making the facade differentiated from the commons and the entrance facades. So they all kind of have their own personality with the same language. If you go to the next page. And again, we had seen this in some of the previous perspectives, but this is the commons facing elevation. And again, bringing in all the elements I was just discussing and lessening a little bit of the amount of glass that's shown. Our development partner has now updated the facade to look like this. Okay, so we can keep going. So the hotel, which is the center building in between the office and the condo, has not had any changes and did not get any comments based on the last submission. Sorry, I was just staying here for 1 second. And now we will just move over to the condo, which again has been tweaked slightly, but remains almost very similar to what we had looked at in the last round of presentations. So if you go to the next slide, again, keeping that black and gray and white geometry, but this building really has its own special personality. As you go in further into the site, the buildings get taller. So the condo and the senior, which are across from each other, the furthest into our site, are the tallest buildings. So it's kind of ramping you up to that. And then people who are on this presentation probably remember past discussions where we wanted to make sure that the condo made sense architecturally and financially, but also gave some breathing room to the school, which is why we have stepped back the terraces that you can see in the image on the right. So in the image on the right, you're basically looking from the top little triangle on the left. Sorry, on the little key plan at the bottom. Yep, that guy. So you're looking basically, the school is on the left. So you're, again, the steps back, move from the school, giving some breathing room. So the closest part to the school is the lowest. And then the center part of the condo, if you can just go to where the little steps are on the key plan, move down a tiny bit. That's an open outdoor space for the condo residents. And then the to the right is where the building steps up into its full height. We'll go to another image, please. Next slide. One of the other changes that we made, again, on the first submission to the second, this to reorient you for what we were just looking at with the key plan. The school's on the left, the commons is on the right, and we had music school, retail, and our kind of civic, a lot of our civic use in that blue space, and then the darker blue space, and then kind of the reddish space was our regular retail. We've now rethought exactly how the civic is going to work if you go to the next page. And we are still keeping this music, educational area. We're still working through the final details on what that is, but we've brought this kind of civic conference space, meeting space, all of that has come into this building to be adjacent to that, to the other use, instead of having them in disparate buildings. So we have just taken some retail out of this building to make sure that we can get all of the uses to make the most sense by being next to each other. If you can go to the next page. And now we'll go to the parking garage. We'll just be talking about some everyone will be talking about some additional exterior features and clarifications to the parking garages that we've made between the first and second SESP submissions.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Laura.
Sure.
Okay, so first we're going to talk about what we call the Block D garage, which is the garage attached to the apartment building on the upper right. And so let's go into the next slide. So our first submission for the west elevation, as I said, we hadn't really designed anything, so these were just very plain. But you can look at the next image. Sorry, go to the next slide. There we go, perfect. Okay, so most of this garage is blocked. It's behind the senior housing building, so you don't see the vast majority of it. So that part we did leave plain. or relatively plain. It'll be a nice precast garage, but without a level of additional detail or placemaking. But the portions that you see, you're now seeing have a red brick surround. And so that first, this is your kind of entrance into the drive coming from Commons. And on the right is the via connecting all the way through and down to Haycock. And so what we've done is we've embed brick around the edges of the facade, and then we've created what is a really nice big art panel in the center. It's outlined and dashed red. And so that element will have some sort of placemaking that will work with the city on some sort of mural element or something really cool. And we've got some ideas of what we may want to do with that so far. And then, of course, the gray band directly above where the cars pull in will be left for signage and the parking counter, things of that sort. On the far left, similarly, we wrapped the brick around the corner so that if you're driving on Mustang Alley, you'll see that same brick frame and it'll be reminiscent of the same garage. And just to give you a sense, the black line that goes above is taller than the garage. That is the elevation of the senior housing in the foreground. And that's why we've kind of shaded that out a little bit, because it blocks the vast majority of that garage. We can just go to the next slide. Okay, now we're looking from Haycock. So similarly on this side, the vast majority of this building will be hidden by directly abutting the phase 2 residential building. So the only portion you'll see is on the far left. But go to the next slide and you'll see where we are now. So similar, almost identical to what we showed on the other side. The entire entrance feature has this really nice red brick, and then you can see the art panel also being installed in the same location. And then we've left an area for signage as well. And then you see the staircase going up to the left of the garage, entering the via. That little awning is where the elevator comes out, right at the top of the stair. Yep, perfect. And then you go straight through towards the Commons. And go to the next facade. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the other garage, which is the Block B garage, which is next to the office, attached to the hotel. And so this is looking at the elevation directly. Where am I? Oh, sorry. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. This is the elevation of the garage from within the via. And so this is the same garage, the Block D garage. So you're looking at the facade from the residential building. The next slide shows that we've kept that same patterning. We've taken the same red brick facade all the way around the edge of that garage. So anybody walking in the via will have that same feeling. And then those panels, you can see, how do I describe this? The darker gray that's on the first floor of the garage in the left image, that's a screening. So that as you're walking in the via, you're not looking into the garage, you're looking at some sort of a screening element that'll have artwork and placemaking on it as well. This area, we've showed it in previous images in our placemaking and amenity plan, is an area where we'll have kind of pretty lights hanging above as well to bring down kind of the feeling and level of that area, and then artwork. You can go to the next slide. Okay, now we're going to go to the other garage, which is the Block B garage. And so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so our initial submission, once again, we hadn't really done any design work yet. And then if you go to the next slide. So on this garage, very similar, a little bit more modern take. We did the same, we're doing a different color, but a similar brick outline facade on the garage. And then you can see, once again, the red outline area is where the art and placemaking elements go. In this case, a little bit more extensive art and placemaking. And as we've said, we'll be working on that with the city. And go to the next slide. Once again, similar here, this is the elevation looking, this is actually the elevation hidden by the hotel on the bottom, so that's completely hidden. Nobody would ever see that. And on the upper level is the view from the schools. This is without any design. And so go to the next slide. So on the bottom, once again, it's fully hidden. Nobody ever sees that because the buildings abut each other. But on the upper level, you're seeing the two darker red brick outlines around the kind of the entry areas or the corner areas, and that entire central zone is the area that we'd like to work with the schools on for mural panels. That's all outlined in red. Actually, not those, sorry, the red outline center. So in this case, unlike the other garage, we're going to do the whole facade. Yeah, exactly. That big 3-bay area will end up with placemaking elements, artwork in coordination with the schools, whether that ends up being brand oriented relative to the schools or ends up being murals over time. That's something we'll start working with the schools on at the when we get through the SESP process and we get started towards permits. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so those are the only changes and updates from our initial submission. And with that, we're happy to have questions.
All right, thank you very much.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. So thank you very much. There's a lot there. There's a lot that Carly went over as well. So we're going to do the best we can to start working on this. This is our first take in a while, and there's a lot here. So my expectation is that we will not get fully through every element that people might want to really go in depth with, but there are more meetings coming up and we may need to have additional work sessions added, et cetera. But I view this as sort of a first cut on things and some initial reactions. So let's go ahead and open it up to questions and comments. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Ms. Hardy?
Hi, thank you for joining us. I'm glad the mayor prefaced with it because I'll be honest, it was a lot for me to take into since it's been a while since we last talked about it. So my questions might be a bit scattered based on the various things we were talked about. So I guess the first one, which I'm sure my colleagues will share in this, is when will your partners and anchors be announced to the extent that you know?
Hi,
Laura,
it's
you wanna take
Robin.
that? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
we are.
Go ahead and take that.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So we're going to be hopefully announcing our office and senior partners soon. The grocer has very strict rules on their NDA, and my understanding is that they do not want to be announcing to the public until quite shortly before they open. So we will probably not be announcing the grocer for quite a while now.
Is that something the city will be privy to? Or
I believe that certain folks in the city will have to go under NDA as well. But
And how about the hotel? Did you mention the hotel flag?
it is a Hilton flag that we're talking to. We are again not ready to announce, but hope to be announcing shortly and before this process wraps up.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
And so that kind of leads to my second question. I didn't, at least when we were going through the renderings, I didn't notice anything for the hotel or the senior housing. Is that dependent on the announcement of those partners before we see the architecture for those?
Oh, sorry. So the hotel architecture. Yeah, we didn't highlight it just because it hasn't changed since our submission last spring, but you can see it in this rendering. And there was that other rendering we showed as well from the park. Cindy, maybe if you could go to slide 3 in the presentation deck. And then in the SESP package, you'll see full, the architectural design, the elevations of the hotel building, but you can see it here. That is the hotel concept design. And the brand has seen that and been part of that process.
And senior housing will be dependent on your partner, or is it?
The way we set it up is that senior housing will actually apply for their own SESP. It was a timing issue, really. So they will actually apply separately and submit their architecture separately.
Got it. Okay. While we're on architecture, so I do like the improvements to the big multifamily building in Block A. So I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. And I've always been a fan of the condo building. And so I think the challenge is how do you bridge between that brick, more traditional, to the very modern white and gray. So I think you're seeing some elements of it. I do feel like they're still a bit disjointed. And so maybe continuing to carry the elements and spread them throughout. I think that would be helpful. Of course, take this all with a grain of salt because I know architecture is pretty subjective, but that was my sense coming away from it as well. I do like the changes that you did to Block A. Everything else in between the condos and the changes in Block A still felt kind of like a mishmash, which maybe, you all trying to bridge the two styles together.
Letty, let me just say that we're still exploring materials for the condo, and we've looked at possibly bringing in some brick to the condo building, so that may help tie them a little bit more together, but we understand what you're saying.
Thank you. And I actually love the condo the way it is, and so I'd hate for you to traditionalize it.
If we did brick, it would be probably a white brick, so it would still maybe have a material similarity, but not bringing in kind of a brown, typical brick color.
Got it. And maybe it's with colors as well that, helps tie everything together. But right now, like I do like, again, the transitions and how you're breaking it up. Obviously, it's a very dense and large block. So I do like the improvements there. But again, tying it all together so it feels cohesive, I think will be important too, while giving each building kind of its own distinct feel.
Okay.
I know it's tough to tackle both of those. In general, one thing that would be helpful for me, because this is twice as big as anything we've reviewed before, I would love more views of what it would be like to be a pedestrian. So where you expect to be a pedestrian, for example, at the corner of Broad and Haycock, when you're in the Commons, when you're in the various Wooners, or when you're going into the garage. I would love to know, like, if I'm a pedestrian standing here, what does it look like for me? I think the big elevations are helpful to see the building. But I think that because this is a pretty big project and we do ultimately want the pedestrian experience to be amazing, I would love to kind of have that view throughout this project where you expect the most pedestrian traffic to be. So that's more of a general request. On bike lanes, I noted, I think in Carly's report, that the bike lanes is moved from move location, essentially on the other side. So now there's, I guess, car traffic, a bike lane, and then parked cars.
That's
and
right.
Is that done because of how we're going to need to connect up to the metro site?
Yeah, we had a series of negotiation meetings with the county over the bike lane placement, and I'd say we fought valiantly to keep the bikes the way we had them, which was hugging the center park space versus between the cars and the travel lane. They could not get comfortable with it, and actually they had a staff member who was pretty good at expressing her thoughts and views on this. And I think her feeling was that the data that they've seen is, while the concept of the bike lanes on the left side of the cars and kind of in the center median almost was a unique and fun thing that's been done in a few locations, that in those locations, it hasn't been all that successful at actually getting people to use them because traditionally cyclists are just used to being on the other side, and they're often not going to go into the middle in order to use a cycle track. And so their preference was to put it where people expect it to be so that it actually functions and gets used as often as possible. And so they can be continuous from the city all the way through the county. So so in the end, it seemed like the right thing to do to have something that's unified throughout the whole district. And that's why we ended up shifting them.
Got it. And I'm sure there's best practices on how wide these lanes need to be, because there's this concept I read about, I think it's called dooring, where essentially your car doors will hit bicyclists. And, and the way to prevent that is make sure things are wide enough. So I assume we would be adhering to whatever those standards are.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you for at least trying to do something innovative. But I do agree that I think unifying it as a connectivity point is important too. I think actually one more, the Civic Space. So this might have been in your previous version, but now I notice that the Civic Space is now on the ground floor of the condos, or at least more of the Civic Space is added there.
Yep.
Did we lose the rooftop terrace Civic Space that might have been in the original version?
Yeah, so that's something we lost way back about almost a year ago when we redesigned the site and came back in with our SESP. We just realized that that space needed to be on the ground level for a whole host of reasons, some of which was just egress constraints of having a second floor entertainment space. And so anyways, we ended up moving that. The outdoor space went away, and that was part of our, if you kind of look through the voluntary concessions, you'll see descriptions of what we're now proposing. It's slightly different. We do think the central park space within the Commons, which is a nice big square open space, could be tented. That could be a place where you could have outdoor events or indoor/outdoor events as well in the city. So there are some opportunities to still have outdoor amenity space.
Got it. And you all probably know better than I do, but hopefully one of the things we learned post-COVID is that all the outdoor space will be even more valued. And so whether it's the Civic Space that we no longer have that's on a rooftop, but to the extent that we can continue adding and be creative with where people can gather, whether it's dining or informally, I'd love to see more of that. I actually did have one last question. So going back to pedestrians. So if you look at maybe one of the earlier views where the garage is coming off of Haycock, can a pedestrian get from those stairs off Haycock into the Commons? like by walking past the garage, or do they need to walk all the way down to the corner of Broad and Haycock and come in through the new street?
No, they can get all the way through. Yeah, if you go to the plan, which is probably the very beginning of the presentation.
Yeah, page 2.
Because a very, very early iteration of it had it kind of go all the way through, and now it's narrowed. And so again, I kind of want to know what the pedestrian experience is.
Yeah, so slide 2, there you go. So if you can see just north of the apartment building, that entire light yellow color essentially is the sidewalk that goes all the way through from Haycock to the Commons. It's just that once you get to the garage, you go up a staircase and continue straight. So Street B on the upper side, because of the 20 some odd feet of grade, that's where you enter into the garage. So that's a street with, you know, active spaces on both sides. And then you enter the garage about halfway into the block, and you enter the same garage from Street C. So the V is the way to get you essentially through the garage without going through a garage. So you can get from the lower portion to the upper portion, but it's continuous the whole length.
Got it.
Right
So maybe tagging on to my earlier request of wherever you think there will be lots of pedestrians, or where the main points of entry into the development will be, I'd love to kind of get more of that pedestrian view.
Got it.
Because right now it doesn't obviously look as wide as coming in through the Commons, and that's a really, really big block, and we don't want people to all have to go in through the Commons if they're pedestrians. Like, we want them to feel like they can enter on Haycock.
Got it.
So maybe having more views of what that experience is like will be helpful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lichtenhouse, followed by Mr. Snyder.
Yep, thanks. So just a couple comments, guys. Letty covered a lot of ground there. One, I appreciate you all revisiting the aesthetics and the design of the residential component. One, I really like it. I think that the redesign is great. I love the look. I love the transition. So well done there. Don't change the condos. If you want to use white brick, that's great. That's my favorite component of this, and it has been from the very beginning. I was, Laura, very critical of the office design last go around, and so I appreciate the attempt to make changes. So the color variation is great, the material variation is great, but the windows, there's less glass. And I know you made a comment about bird strike. That wasn't necessarily, or that wasn't my concern. Maybe it is for some. I always like more glass in office buildings, but it makes me think that a lot of those design changes, not only with the development partner, but for a specific user. Is that correct? I mean, it seems like that's kind of a consistent fit for a particular type of user across that office building. Is that why you guys made those changes?
We made those changes more to respond to the aesthetic and some pricing concerns as we were continuing to move forward, but not for a specific user type. Robin,
Okay.
I don't know if you have any additional comment on that.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
But we appreciate your feedback on that.
Yeah,
piece.
I mean, I always prefer more glass. I know it's more expensive. I think bigger the windows, the better for the office and the light that passes through. So again, I like the color variation and I like the patterning that you guys broke it up. You know, I was hoping to see, I think, more kind of dynamic changes in the architecture, whether it's bump outs in certain spaces, just something really unique. I mean, again, you've changed the patterning and the color in the box, but it's still a box, right? So I'd like to see a little more dynamic than that if it's possible. And I'd like to see more glass. I know that there are cost concerns, but I just feel that that makes it a much more attractive and modern looking building. But again, kudos to you guys for the change on the residential. I really, really like, and I'll say it. I think it's beautiful what you guys have done with that residential component. So really well done there. And I'll just reserve time for questions once we have a chance to dig into all of these details. But again, thanks for that.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, thanks. Could we go back to the staff report, please? Could we go back to the provision? I think it's around 350 or something like that, where we're talking about changes to the what I'll call the enforcement provisions.
I think it's 350, 351, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So I'm trying to understand what the proposal is here. Yeah, I guess it's VC number 2. So can city staff explain to me what was provided for before, what the change is, and what significance it has?
Are you talking about all A, B, and C, or just C?
C, VC number 2C, subsection C. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the original VCs had that first italicized sentence that they would not get the last 100,000 square foot of residential use until they've started on the office hotel. And that made sense for when that design happened. That was when the micro apartments were split out from the rest of the apartment buildings and was actually in that block C where the condo building is now. So once they were all combined into one building, it made that VC a little bit tougher to meet, to enforce. And so they've now added some language that I will say this is what they have put in there. We are looking at it at the staff level, but that they would tie it to a CO for the block A, for the building A residential building instead of square footages.
And I can jump in a little bit and just describe why to be a little helpful here. So
Sure.
The phasing plan has always been because the apartment building at the corner is going to be one of the longest to construct, and because we have to get the grocery open as quickly as possible, given our lease with them. We always knew that building needed to start early. When it used to be two completely separate apartment buildings, it was easy to say we won't start the other 100,000 until we've started construction on the office and the hotel. The office and hotel construction period, since they're relatively short buildings that sit on grade, is a little bit more than half the amount of time it will take us to build the apartment building. And so we need to be able to start the apartment building, do a site work infrastructure, get the other two buildings started, and then they'll deliver right around the same time as the apartment building. So the idea is we're willing to risk the C of O, but we can't, if we start those two buildings at the same time as the apartment, we'll end up having two fully completed empty buildings for about a year until we can get the apartment building, the grocer, the retail, the streetscape open so we can actually get cars to the garages. So it's really a scheduling and timing thing more than anything else.
Okay. So I'll ask city staff to keep us informed about developments there. And I may ask you to revisit it so that I can understand it, but thanks for that. DC number 3, addition of permitted uses not explicitly listed in the B2 zoning district. So what impact will that have on the fiscal projections for the project?
So that's part of what we are looking at now. We have a meeting with economic development and the assessor next week to get a better idea of what those uses are that they're considering and what we would assess them at, and then input that into our model and evaluate that. But we would expect and want that they would be similar to other uses that could be by right within the site, or other uses that are already approved.
So when will we be able to see the latest version of the fiscal model?
Meet next week.
With these changes, with these proposed changes.
I'd say earliest maybe in a couple weeks, because the meeting isn't until next week. So. Okay.
So I would like to see that as early as possible. Well, the pictures are great. The finances are more important to me. Second, okay, so here are some questions for the developer. What's the status of your agreement with the office builder, the office partner?
We are just finishing negotiating the terms of that agreement.
You're what? I'm sorry?
Finishing negotiating the terms of that. We are very close to that.
You're close, but you don't have an agreement yet. Okay. And how about for the senior building?
The same.
Pardon?
The same answer for that.
The same. Okay. And how about the retail? Do you have leases for the retail space? And can you tell us a little bit about what your status is for those?
Sure. The grocer lease is signed.
Okay.
So that is a great thing moving forward. And otherwise, it's quite early to have retail leases signed. So we have a merchandising plan. We're going to start working with the broker. We are in discussions with many different people that are interested, but this far out with really a summer 2024 opening would be early to expect something like that.
So summer of 2024 is kind of what you're expecting, that the project would be open, or at least the retail would be open?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any negotiations ongoing with I don't mean the school in particular, the music school, but I mean like entertainment venues or something that's different from retail, restaurants, and I guess some of the services you're going to be putting in? Do you have any sort of outreach? And tell me a little bit about your outreach.
Sure. We have discussed different possibilities with various groups around the area. I don't think we can really provide more information on that right now, but we're open to a lot of different possibilities. Again, not talking about the civic use, but more about possibly bringing in a brewery or some sort of entertainment venue or things like that. I think that those are all possibilities, but nothing more to put in the public record at this time.
I will add, though, Dave, that, the contacts that we have in that entertainment space, obviously with the Anthem at the Wharf and Union Stage, that industry has obviously been amongst the most challenged during the pandemic. So they're not really, none of those folks are, one of those people turned down the opportunity of coming to the project previously, even before the pandemic. And I think certainly now is not anyone's time to think of expansion, but we're hoping that by, towards the end of this year, with things starting to look up again, that people will start to be thinking of, new opportunities again.
Certainly, we all hope for that. Okay, thanks. Those are the questions that I had right now. Most of them are really directed towards city staff, so I look forward to more information, particularly on any changes to the contract and the financials. Thank you.
All right. Other questions or comments from council? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. So the senior component, you described it as traveling on a somewhat separate track in terms of the special exception, but it's still planned to be part of phase one, right? I mean, in terms of when it would be built and when it would open?
That's correct. It may start construction slightly after the rest of phase one and open slightly after the grand opening of phase one, but yes, it's still within the time frame of that.
Okay. And remind me again now about the hotel. Are we talking about a hotel that's got its own standalone, ballroom facility, conference type facilities, or is it really more of a residential play?
So the hotel is an extended stay hotel, and that was really what made the most sense based on all of the market information that we received, not only because it's a component that there could be more of in Falls Church, but also with the adjacency to the senior, again, families coming to visit their relatives in the senior building, but also the proximity to Tyson's and DC, kind of easy place to stay, and the proximity of the metro. So it's not that hotel type doesn't typically have a ballroom or meeting space because people are staying there more to be able to then go out and do their business or see their families from that space. So the brand actually does not require or even recommend a meeting space like that. There is going to be kind of a large lobby with different areas for meeting, for eating breakfast, all of those things. So it'll be kind of like a big modern hotel lobby, but in terms of a ballroom or something like that, that's more served by the Civic location, the meeting space in the condo building.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. That's what I was going to ask you next. So the Civic Space that's in that condominium building, is that going to be suitable for community events, tabled community events of, a couple hundred people, or is it a civic space that's, not quite as ambitious as that?
We are still working on exactly how the civic space and the adjacent educational space are going to work with each other. It will definitely be a flexible space for meetings. Again, 500 people, I'm not sure we'll be able to fit that many, but we are planning to have this approximately 2,000 square foot space that I think will give maximum flexibility for different community uses, meetings, events, all of that. Okay.
I'm just curious to understand the situation with the grocer. So you've signed a lease with a grocer, which is great news. What is it about, just without revealing any trade secrets, what is it about the nature of the business that, as I hear you describe it, we might not know what the community at least might not know what the grocery is going to be until, they begin to line the shopping carts up and hang the signs out. Is that unusual? Typically the groceries that we've been dealing with here in town, at some point along the line, we know what they're going to be well before the building is built and it's ready to be opened. I'm just curious what's different about this particular situation.
Robin, since you've had the most discussion with them, I don't know if you are interested in.
Yeah,
taking that.
unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to say very much. I guess I could say at minimum, I think it is a bit unusual. But the nature of our NDA really prohibits me from saying much more than that.
I think one concept is to get some folks at the city comfortable with who the tenant is through a non-disclosure agreement. But unfortunately, that's kind of for right now, that's their operating procedure. That doesn't mean that that'll be their operating procedure through 2024 when we open. But right now, that's in order to get the deal signed, we had to agree to that.
Okay, well, tell them that we welcome them to Falls Church and we're happy they've signed a lease, and we would love to be able to, get that out into circulation, because we believe that it would, enhance the ability of the rest of the project to fill itself out. It's in their best interests, it seems to me. But hey, I'm not an expert on the grocery business. I have just, seen at least 4 or 5 come through during my time on council, and all, I think, have been very successful. So that's good. It's a good use. Okay, well, do what you can on that. On the parking garage, the number of EV charging, I brought this up in connection with one of the other projects. I remain concerned that, we're pretty soon going to be switching to a heavily electric vehicle fleet, and that our parking facilities that we're building in the early 20s are not going to meet the charging needs of the fleets of the early 30s. Do you have any thoughts about what are y'all doing in other places about that? It's nice that.
Yeah, I can address that, and then Robin or Laura, you can also add on. But one of the nice things about EV is that it's very easy to add EV along the way. And so for large mixed-use projects, the best practices right now, since you don't necessarily know where the demand is going to be on day one and from which types of tenants, is to leave yourself flexibility. And so we've agreed to a number, to do a certain number of chargers, and we certainly have agreed to have a fast charger, almost like a gas station on site. But the thought is, the EV companies, often you'll sign a contract with them, where as you have demand, let's say from apartment tenants, they'll actually come in and often pay for all or a portion of the infrastructure to put in the electricity to the spaces so that you can have those chargers for the tenants. In a condo building, you typically charge the condo purchaser will pay for their own EV install within the garage. Office tenants, similarly, as you get more contracts for EV, you add more spaces. So when EV first started, and a number of years ago, for example, when Pike and Rose first started, it was typical in jurisdictions to say, we need to mandate a certain number of spaces. The market will mandate it. At Pike and Rose, they've added a ton of EV. over the years, just based upon demand as people buy Teslas, so or other electric cars. So I wouldn't get too hung up or worried about that. To the extent people have electric needs in the building, in either the office or the residential buildings, we're gonna figure out a way to get them the electric to charge their cars, because it's a revenue source for the project.
Okay, great. That's a good answer. If somebody else is willing to pay for it later down the line, I'm all for that.
I just wanted to add also that not only are we installing the EV stations that Evan talked about, but we also are installing infrastructure for, I believe, 15 additional stations as part of our voluntary concessions.
Right, 15 or 30, I think I saw somewhere in the document. Yeah, okay, that's good. All right. Let me just ask one final question about the residential component. We haven't talked about numbers tonight, but has there been any, change, or basically, can you just go sort of over how many total units you expect, apartments, condominiums? Have you thought anything about the affordable housing component of the voluntary concessions in any further detail?
Laura, do you want to take that?
Yeah, with the condo, we're at about 125 to 130 units. We're finalizing that. And then with the apartment, again, I'm very happy to hear how well the apartment A new facade has been received. Some of the changes that we made have changed some of the unit mix, so we're working through that now, but I'd say we'll end up at a similar number in the 390 to 400 probably for apartments. So, and then our affordable housing component, the 6% requirement that we have discussed since the beginning, we are continuing to allocate that to the different sized units and then kind of spread out throughout the building. So basically, I would say beyond some slight tweaks to the unit mix in the A apartment, nothing's really changed on that since the last submission.
Okay, so 6%, 60% AMI, is that what you're modeling out?
Evan, actually, can you speak to if we ended up at that or at a 40-80 split?
On average. So that is something we still need to work through with the city, the concept of whether we do all the units at 60%, some of the units at 40, some of the units at 80. And so the VC, I believe, is that it averages out to 60, and there's flexibility, quite frankly, on our side. In that regard, we had made a recommendation to the city based upon a meeting we had with staff that had, I think it was a desire for smaller units at 40% of AMI to get the cost as low as possible, and then some of the larger units, 2 bedrooms at 80% AMI, and we're still looking for official feedback on that.
Okay, great. Well, we'll leave that in staff hands for now. Obviously, you've been following the news. You know that this is a matter of great community interest, so we appreciate your continued pursuit of the best possible arrangement we can get for everybody on that. Okay, thanks very much.
All right, other questions or comments? And remember, we will have plenty more time to go over this in more detail and more depth. If not, I have a few comments. All right, I'm going to go ahead. So one, I do share Dave's concern about the VC. I heard your explanation and I understand that, but just on one of our other projects, Founders Row, for example, we had the issue where they weren't going to get COs for half their building, and nobody wants that. And so that's just not a good circumstance to be in. So I would suggest to council or to staff that we look for some kind of middle ground that addresses your needs, but at the same time protects the city on the thing that many of us want to make sure happens, and we're not sort of left at the end like we were in Founders Row with not wanting to shut down a project and not grant COs. So I do have that concern. I wonder if you could just confirm, is the total GFA the same on all the categories as it was the last time we saw this? In other words, residential square footage is literally the exact same, or has anything changed from before and after as far as square footage?
I believe from the first SESP submission to now, so from last June to now, there may be some slight tweaks, but nothing. We can confirm that for you. But
so what would be good is maybe next time just a table, from like time 1 to time 2. This is how much residential, this is how much retail, just precisely what it is and what it was and what it is, just to confirm that. I would suggest, and I made this comment before, is just trying to ensure that the outer wall of this project isn't like the mosaic where you basically can only get in one way or two ways, and the rest of it is kind of a fortress around the edge. I'd like to make sure we have some porosity and permeability along the edges, and also just entrances and some outdoor seating along those major frontages. I know it's not your number one, way you want to look at this project, but I think it's important nonetheless to just have entrances, a lot of transparency, some outdoor seating along the perimeter and periphery.
So Mayor Tartar, can I just walk you through
Yeah.
a little bit in terms of the porosity? Because I think it's a great question, and I know we've talked a lot about the Haycock Road facade and kind of the ins and outs, and to make it more interesting. But again, and I think Letty made a great point about getting kind of what's the pedestrian experience coming in from Haycock, but you're coming into even the garage itself. We were actually going through all of the circulation routes today. Even garage G2, you have 3 entrances to it. You have one from Mustang Alley, one from Street B, one from Street C. You can also come into the site from Street C. Yeah, sorry, Cindy, I'm going faster than your mouse can cover it. But Street C, again, it looks very small here, but we're going to have this 10-foot wide staircase, and it's going to feel this grand experience that you're going to want to go up and see. But you can also come into the site from Commons. You can also, again, with the grocer having 2 entrances, with the connection from Street A to the school drop-off and to the school, I think you're going to feel a lot of porosity, and I, as compared to maybe an experience more like Mosaic. And I think we've thought through that, and I think responding to what Letty had asked for about the pedestrian experience, I think a few more images will help you understand our vision for how the space will feel.
Got it. And I guess by porosity, what I mean is not necessarily for cars to get in and out, but more for people. And so people walking will be invited in through entrances, through attractive facades, maybe with outdoor seating, but essentially to enliven the periphery and perimeter of this project, so people want to be there, not just to drive in and experience it once they get there, but people driving by will see that they can walk through there and they don't have to go through the one hole in the place, but that there are other entrances that aren't just for cars or car-centric, but actually pedestrian-centric, nooks and crannies that people can get in multiple ways. And we don't have to go through all the details tonight, but I guess I would just suggest or ask that you just keep that in mind as you put together some of the details.
We'll bring that up more when we go through the placemaking in more detail also with you.
Gotcha. So you signed a grocer. You won't tell us who it is. Can you tell us how much GFA they're getting?
About 40,000 square feet.
Okay. Will that also include, like prepared meals and the like? Is it that kind of grocer? Can you give us that much detail?
I think it will include kind of all the typical things that a grocer is today. So fresh foods and prepared foods, yes.
Got it. Okay. Materials, I'd like to focus just a bit on materials. So I presume you have masonry. It looks like you have some concrete, some either precast concrete or other concrete. Do you have cementitious boards, panels, metal panels? What do you have?
We have a mix of all of those different pieces, and it depends on the building. Again, a lot of masonry, but also metal panel that you're seeing in the condo right here. And then again, all the different glass that we have. But yes, we do have some hardy board or cementitious panel type of material. I actually prepared a little presentation. I don't know if I'm allowed to steal the screen from you, Cindy, but to go over, we've heard some of your questions and concerns in previous meetings about the cementitious panels, and wanted to show some examples of them in buildings that already exist in the DC area. So
yeah, I'm familiar with the material. That's why I don't like it, to be honest with you. But I mean, I'm sure you could show me some better images, but I've certainly seen some that I'm not a big fan of. And I guess given the hour, I might just suggest maybe we could save that for another meeting to go into a little more detail, unless it's very quick. If it's quick, you're free to go ahead and show it.
That's fine. We're happy to show it at a different meeting, but I think that we want to show that integrating some of that material in with all of the other myriad materials that we're using, I think is going to really pull the project together, bring the buildings together, and then also work in some of the construction challenges that everybody's seeing these days. So.
Got it. Yeah, and I understand, and I know that cost is a factor with all you're doing here as well. But I guess I would just say my vote for less would be more from my perspective. So also on the garages, I have to say, it looks like you've got some brick, kind of on the corners or the entrances. I would encourage you, if you can, to try some green walls. In other words, some plant materials, vines, etc.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of precast concrete, even if it's hidden, frankly, and particularly the one that faces the school, even if it's going to have some artwork on it. I would hope that you could try to find a way to kind of spruce that up a little bit. But to my mind, a green wall is a nice, environmentally sound way to do that.
Yeah, that's an option that we are investigating further. I think we're trying to find the right balance again between aesthetics and cost, and also being able to keep something that looks good the 6 months of the year that things don't really bloom or are not green. So, but we appreciate that and want to make the garages attractive.
Yeah, and that is the facade where it probably makes the most sense because it's west and gets really good sunlight. So that is a place we had looked at some vine pockets or other treatments there.
Yeah, I would just say throughout, I mean, facing the school, it seems like that's going to be a very prominent feature. And again, whatever you might be able to do to spruce up precast concrete bolted together, I think would be a good idea and certainly be welcomed by myself. Let me ask you, going back to one of your earlier images at 7 and Haycock, it looked like the building kind of steps back, that one part of the building steps back fairly significantly from the others, but maybe that's just because I didn't see it very well. One of your first couple images, maybe your second one on the screen. No, the grocery store building. One or two.
Are you talking about the full rendering of that? That's about halfway through.
Yeah, if you tell me what slide number, I'm glad to move to it.
Oh, yeah, let me pull my own presentation.
Mayor Tarter, you're talking about the new rendering at the corner of Haycock and 7?
Yes, where it's really well lit and it's just kind of the lights beaming out. But it looked like the building has not really a separation, but it looks like there's a pretty decent step back. Yeah, right there. Does the building step back there, and if so, how much?
Not at the ground level, just at the residential levels above. So that's how we get that feeling from a distance that it looks like multiple buildings. But the grocer on the ground floor is continuous.
But up above, how much step back do you have, or setback?
I don't want to
like
quote
6.
one number. I thought it was 4 feet, but
yeah.
But we can get you that number.
I got to say,
also that'll be in the plans that were submitted as part of the SESP. So again, I know you guys are going to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So if there are more details that are needed on that, we're happy to provide.
I just have to say, I don't want to get too deep in your architecture, but it seems like it takes away a little bit from the corner, in terms of the strength of the corner to have the building kind of set in like that, but maybe I'll leave that for another day. The Civic Space, has the Civic Space reduced or been reduced? It seems like it has. Is that accurate to say, or am I just not understanding it right?
I think well, we were previously showing more of it in the office building. I think where it is now in the condo has some flexibility for expansion. So I would say what we're showing on the plan has reduced slightly, maybe like 1,000 or 3,000 square feet, but it still has expansion options, which are mentioned in our submission.
So I would just say, as relates to Civic Space, it seems like it's now just sort of becoming servicing the building that it's in. And I would just ask you to try to make sure it kind of continues to be something broader than just, space for the building occupants, but actually is, truly civic space. And I'm not sure what.
This isn't.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say this isn't accessible at all to the building occupants. This is its own separate space. I'm not.
Okay.
It's on the ground floor, so it accesses directly from outside as if it's retail space.
Okay.
So it's fully accessible. Yeah.
Gotcha. But I guess I would just want to make sure that the space is not sort of co-opted as the community room for the building or something like that, but that it truly remains programmed.
No.
Available.
Yeah. Also, we have. Yeah, the condo building has its own common room and gym and space. Outdoor space and all of that. So we don't anticipate that being an issue.
Okay. And then my last comment for the moment is just about bike share as part of your TDM. To my mind, this project probably can support, 2 bike share stations. And so I guess I would just ask you to consider that. You've got proximity to Metro, which has its own bike share, and we've rolled out, maybe since you first saw us, a series of bike share stations throughout the city, which I think are doing pretty well given the circumstances right now. And to my mind, it would be great to have you all propose some bike share on your site as part of your traffic demand management plan. And so I just ask you to give some thought to that as well.
I believe we're already planning to relocate one of the bike shares that already exists on the site. So
Laura,
Amy, go ahead.
This is Amy Friedlander from EYA. VCs already do include a commitment to bike share, whether it's relocated from the existing bike share that's on site today, or a new bike share if that is not made. That's not feasible.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind. I mean, to my mind, this site may support 2 bike share stations, but I think that would be a good avenue for your TDM plan. But just keep that in mind. We don't have to fully flush out these things right now, but it's just a thought I had. I think that's all I have as far as comments for this moment. But certainly this is a good start for conversation, and we know there's more work to be done, and we appreciate all all that you've done to date. Looks like Dave Snyder's got one last comment. I'm going to go ahead and recognize him. Dave?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor, and thanks everyone for a great discussion. Question, bus rapid transit on 7, do you still have a place where that could be stopped along the Route 7 side of the development?
Yeah, that's in the same location that it has been and is shown in the SESP submission. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Sure.
All right, so unless there are any other comments or questions at this time, I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. And there's a lot of good stuff here, and we've got some more work to be doing, but thank you very much. It's very exciting for all of us.
Thanks to all of you as well.
Thanks. Yeah, we're
thank you.
looking forward to continuing the conversation.
As are we. So
Mayor Tarter?
Yeah.
If I could just add a piece of information for the public that has a bearing on the project. It's news about the Virginia Tech site, which has become public today, and I want to just put it out there so those that are watching are aware of it, and it's really something that is more proper for Virginia Tech or HIT to report out on, but it is of the public interest. And so I'll just provide an update for the public. And that is that Virginia Tech, which is immediately adjacent to the 10-acre site, announced today that by mutual agreement, HIT and Virginia Tech will not be moving forward with the planned public-private partnership on the site that is owned by the city and leased to Virginia Tech, again, immediately adjacent to the 10 acres that we've been talking about tonight. As I think most are aware, approximately 2 years ago, HIT's development arm, Rushmark Properties, submitted to Virginia Tech a proposal to build a new Virginia Tech facility on the site that would house programs within the architecture and engineering departments of Virginia Tech, with a focus on advanced construction techniques and technology. HIT also proposed to construct its new corporate headquarters on the site, as well as an apartment and residential development that would front on Haycock Road. HIT and Virginia Tech joined WMATA in asking for a comp plan amendment for the area adjacent to the West Falls Church Virginia Tech Metro Rail Station through the Fairfax County Planning Department. And EYA and Hoffman, who we've been talking with tonight on our site plan, they've been working very hard just to coordinate plans and share transportation planning details for over 2 years with the Rushmark, HIT, and Virginia Tech team. And of course, the uses of a new dynamic academic program, corporate headquarters, and residential were all complementary to the commercial uses that are planned on the city's West Falls Church, West Falls site. So naturally, we're sorry to hear this news that they're not proceeding with their plans, particularly given how much work had gone into it. There are a couple of key points, though, that I do want to share, just three points. First, Virginia Tech has indicated to me that they plan to continue to request and participate in the comp plan amendment that is working through the Fairfax County planning process. Second, that the road that we have been discussing tonight that goes right through the heart of our development and would ultimately connect to West Falls Church Metro remains a joint interest of Virginia Tech, Fairfax County, and the city. And Virginia Tech has expressed to me its continued willingness to cooperate on the construction of that road connecting our project to the metro station. So that's important to all parties and really to the traveling public and having that urban grid of streets that will help reduce traffic on Haycock. And third, and just lastly, in terms of my report tonight, the city has sought, in partnership with Virginia Tech, $10 million in funding from the Commonwealth of Virginia to support infrastructure on the site with a focus on bringing the work that Virginia Tech is doing in the area of smart cities, best practices for infrastructure, to apply that for the entire site, including the WMATA site, the Virginia Tech site, and the city site. Cindy Mester has been our staff lead on that and has worked, I think, very successfully with the General Assembly. And we think that it's very likely that that funding will be approved and will be announced very shortly. The General Assembly has been supportive of this request and with the really great and critical assistance of Senator Saslaw of that funding amount. So Virginia Tech has expressed their full support for proceeding with this Smart Cities grant. It really was a joint idea between the city and Virginia Tech from the beginning, and they are fully in support of proceeding with that. And so I think that's very important and positive. So we will continue to work with Virginia Tech as a long-term partner with the city. Rushmark, is my understanding, is still a partner on the WMATA site. And so we still do have work to do to kind of reimagine the Virginia Tech campus. But I did want to share that news tonight. And as we get more information from Virginia Tech, we will certainly share that with the public as best as we're able. Thank you. I just wanted to let people know of that development.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shields. So we've been at this for about 2 hours. So what I'm going to suggest is we take a short 5-minute break before we get to the last two items of business, which hopefully we can roll through fairly quickly. But so let's go ahead and take a short recess. It's 10:03 now and reconvene at 10:08. Thank you all very much. ready to get back started?
Yes,
Back to-
Mayor.
All right.
FCTV's ready.
All right, let's go on to the next item then, the noise code amendment. Mr. Shields?
Well, thank you, Mayor. And actually, I will invite the city attorney just to introduce this item. Our recommendation tonight is to put this on the agenda for your next meeting on March 8th. And it has had quite a bit of discussion. And our recommendation is to move forward for adoption so we can enforce the existing ordinance. And then from there, if there are additional tweaks we need to make after we've had some more experience with that enforcement, we could come back and make amendments. But Ms. McCoskey, do you want to summarize any of the key points in it?
Well, I think if you show in the staff report, beginning at line 85, I had mentioned 3 issues that were potentially out there. One is the time. Should we change from 9 p.m. to a later hour? And I think the recommendation currently from staff is to leave it at 9 p.m. and allow waivers for special things and see how that goes for a period of time while we have the decibel enforcement that we have not had and as things normalize. Number 3 at line 91 is about changing decibel levels. That can't be done without a new first reading, and I'm not sure that anybody has an idea of something they specifically want to change, so we suggest we wait also on that and see how things go. And then number 2 at line 88 was simply that there should be only one piece of using only one piece of small power equipment to be an exemption from the noise ordinance. And I think that, that could be considered. It's sort of difficult only in that when people have a service come in, they're usually coming in with a couple pieces of power equipment, a leaf blower and a lawnmower, and it makes it a quick noise, but a little more noise for a period of time. But it would be, I think, difficult for people to observe that rule throughout the city.
All right, thank you. Are there questions or comments? And we have spent a fair amount of time talking about this, so I think we need to move towards some kind of resolution, whether it ultimately needs to be tweaked or changes after we have some experience with it. But I do think it's time to start getting ready to approve something. Ms. Hardy, then Mr. Snyder, then Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Thank you. I think last time we had talked about doing a field trip so that we can be better informed to decide about numbers 1 and 3. Wyatt, do you have an update on that?
Ms. Hardy, I'm sorry, I missed your question.
Oh, I was saying that to inform our decision on numbers 1 and 3, we talked about doing a field trip out to kind of with the decibel meter and the police department to assess times and decibel levels. Do you have an update on that?
I don't. It really kind of is dependent on when the live music is occurring, but I will certainly get no doubt. I might have to just ask council members to be kind of ready to at such time as we know we'll be out in the field testing. I would think probably Thursday night is likely a time to pencil in as a night we might have live entertainment where we could have that field trip.
Thank you. And then I was the one that actually suggested kind of a modification to the exception that we're creating for lawn equipment. So I think we all have seen the citizen comment, because I think as I understand it today, in the noise ordinance as proposed, or actually before the changes, lawn equipment is currently illegal, which obviously is not realistic because everyone usually operates lawn equipment. So I think the comment we had gotten from the citizen is to consider that commercial usage would certainly exceed the ordinance. And so whether we want to actually limit the exception so that lots of lawn equipment is still a violation.
Well, I mean, from what we just heard, and from my experience, usually crews come in with multiple pieces of equipment. What are you suggesting?
Well, I think the comment was that, because we're creating an exception for that to happen right now, all of it's illegal. And I think we're creating this exception so that it would be allowed. And I think the comment we had received from the citizen is whether we'd want to limit that exception so that I mean, in reality, it likely won't be enforced because by the time they're done, the police wouldn't really be able to enforce it, but not to condone all that extra noise in the neighborhoods.
I don't know. I mean, to my mind, that's how it works. If you have a lawn service, they generally don't come out one at a time. They got a whole crew that's got, 2 deck mowers and a leaf blower or whatever it might be. And so I guess I don't have an issue with that. I don't know if anyone else does, but having more than one piece of lawn equipment operating at the same time. Personally, I have absolutely no problem with that during, normal hours. But if other people feel differently, let's hear from it. But, and I don't know if the city attorney has anything to add to that as well.
Well, the exception that we have written in now is that operation of the equipment for more than 3 hours during the daytime in any 24-hour period shall not constitute it should not be more than 3 hours. It should be for up to 3 hours during the daytime in any 24-hour period shall not constitute a noise violation. So that gives a certain amount of time and and provides the exemption for small power equipment.
Now, so what you're saying right now is the ordinance does allow multiple pieces of equipment at a time, as long as it doesn't exceed 3 hours.
The advertised exception would allow that, yes.
Okay. Does anyone have an issue with having more than one piece of equipment operating at one time?
I do not.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I just think that's how, landscaping companies function. I'm not even sure, I think it'd be great difficulty to try to do differently here in the city. Other comments, Letty?
No, just those two.
Okay. Mr. Snyder?
Sure. So thank you. I want to, one of the issues that I've had is that this whole issue has arisen out of a very unique circumstance. That is a business during a pandemic opening up in very close proximity to a multifamily building, causing disturbances to that building with a business which we'd like to preserve, but doesn't seem to have been able to manage the situation. And yet we're applying this across the entire city. For example, the area around the State Theater where you don't have that proximity, and you could assure revenue to those businesses with a fairly lenient ordinance, because you don't have a large number of residences nearby. So we're sort of responding to a unique set of facts, and my concern is unintended collateral damage. So let me ask a couple questions so that we avoid that as we go forward. Have letters gone out to businesses? I think that they have. Is that right, Mr. City Manager or City Attorney?
That is correct. The businesses that are having live entertainment have all received a letter.
And how recently has it been enough time for those businesses to respond back to us that whatever it is we're enforcing, is it acceptable to them, or would it significantly reduce their ability to survive as economic enterprises?
In truth, I've not gotten very much reaction to that letter. It was sent 3 weeks ago. And so I have not received any direct feedback on it. I will note, however, that every weekend since that letter has been sent has been a heavy rain, really cold, pretty miserable weather.
Right,
so
exactly.
We should be mindful of that as well.
So what is the impact of this? So let me go back to the hours. So let's say it's Wednesday night. How long can I have what level of sound?
The daytime level of sound is in effect until 9 p.m.
Okay.
And so that's usually about 10 decibels less than the nighttime level, and it depends a little bit on where you're located. There's a table in the ordinance. So if you're in an M1 district, I'm sorry, M1 has the same level at all times. But for instance, if you're an R1A district, in the daytime, your allowed level of sound is 65 decibels, and in the nighttime it's 60 decibels. So so up until 9 p.m. you can be measured at 65 decibels, and then after that it would only be 60 decibels.
Carol, this is Steve Rao.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to jump in.
No,
the chart is still shifted downwards incorrectly.
Okay.
Okay. So really the 60 and 80 line that we're seeing right now should run into the R1A daytime line.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So your R1A daytime decibel level is 60. Your R1A
Right.
nighttime decibel level is 55.
55.
And then if who's ever got control, bring it, go the other way. This right here, you see your T2s, your OD, your B1 through 3, their decibel levels, that shift goes upwards to 65.
But they have the same levels
At all times.
daytime and nighttime.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now I'm still trying to work my way through here. So so I'm the State Theater, and they did send us a note. And by the way, they've created an amazing venue there between the State Theater and Clarendon. It's just an amazing creativity. So, and I don't want to lose that. So what's the impact on whatever it is we're going to be looking at next Monday on, for example, the State Theater or Ireland's Four Provinces or the Dogwood?
These amendments would not change this ordinance with respect to those things, with respect to the noise levels in the districts. The ordinance primarily is taking out the standard that's based on a reasonable person standard that was found to be unconstitutional. And then we have made these other, some clarifications and other tweaks, but in terms of the decibel levels, they have not been changed at this point. The timing and the decibel levels are not being changed as part of this ordinance.
So, so let's take the State Theater area for a minute, just as a hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
So, how late can I have outdoor music?
Well, it's measured by decibel levels. So really the decibel level goes down at 9 p.m. to reflect nighttime hours. So it depends on the decibel level, but the change is that as of 9 p.m., which is the end of daytime, beginning of nighttime, it goes down. The amount of sound you can have by 5 decibels.
And do we know if that decibel level is something that is workable for the State Theater or Clarendon's? Do we know?
I would ask Captain Rao, do you have sort of experience with that in seeing whether they're general in compliance or not? This is where we only recently, this ordinance change came up to eliminate the reasonable person standard. And these other issues are out there partly because of COVID and people doing more things outdoors. But I think, I don't know if we have enough experience to know whether the decibel levels in the ordinance are causing problems for those businesses.
What I would say is prior to prior to COVID, I don't think we received as many noise complaints. The issues that we, when we look about enforcement, the police department purchased a sound meter because we knew we had to take out this reasonable person statute that was
Right.
Deemed unconstitutional. So then when music venues went outdoors, we actually, the amount of complaints went up. So the thing to remember is this. For a violation to occur, the police department is measuring the sound levels across a property boundary. Okay? So the noise violation is not per se on the grounds of any one of those venues, be it Clarendon, State Theater, Distillery, it doesn't matter. The violation occurs when you go over to Lawton Street, okay, and you measure the sound on Lawton Street, okay, and at that point, if we get a complaint, that's where we're going to go, and we're going to measure the sound level from there. And if it's before 9 p.m., if they've got 60 decibels, and if it's after 9 p.m., they've got 55 decibels. So we're not going up to the speaker or to a bar table, okay, at one of these venues and measuring the decibel level. We're actually measuring it on another person's property, thus the violation across a property boundary.
Right, I appreciate knowing that, but what I'm really interested in knowing is whether this ordinance, as we're proposing it, is going to significantly harm businesses unnecessarily. In other words, that's what I want to go. Again, I'm not talking about a unique factual situation where we have a lot of apartments right up against an outdoor venue. And yes, maybe something has to be worked out, should be worked out there to prevent what's happening. But I'm concerned now that we're talking about a citywide ordinance and the potential unintended negative consequences to a lot of other businesses that are fighting to survive and are actually creating some very unique venues that, by the way, also generate significant amounts of money to support city activities. So I'm just, you see where I'm trying to go with this? I'm trying to understand what the real world ramifications are to businesses across the city.
And Captain Rao, perhaps you remember we did a little work at one point and you looked at all the historic complaints and they were vast. As I recall, the vast majority of them were related to this one particular situation and not to these other businesses. And I don't think there have been significant complaints about the noise from the other businesses, but maybe you can speak to that with more experience.
Well, I know that there have been complaints for just about any venue that has been playing outdoor music at one point or another since COVID started. We've had complaints. Obviously, one business we've gotten more complaints than others, and then other businesses where we've gotten complaints, they stopped doing music for the winter time. So we've had complaints, varying levels and varying amounts, basically, while we've been dealing with COVID. As to whether this is going to hurt business or not, I don't know. I can't answer that. I can't answer if someone's going to stop coming to an outdoor venue because they can't play the music loud. I can't answer that question.
The businesses can give you some idea as to whether we're clamping down in a way that would significantly harm their business model. And to me, I would like to know that before I vote on this. Clearly, we have a factual situation with legitimate complaints and the inability, apparently, of the business, to, do some sort of compromise that would be a win-win. So we're now in the process of looking at this ordinance again, and I just want to know that we're not having unintended negative consequences on our business community. At the same time, of course, that we're maintaining reasonable, protections for the residential areas around. I'm just trying to figure out, I want to avoid unintended negative consequences, and I'm not convinced that we've really done that yet.
Well,
So
people want, if you want that information or others want that information, I would suggest, the police go out with a meter and as kind of the field trip Letty suggested, and go observe what the readings are on a, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, where they would ordinarily be done, and see what those numbers are. And I don't know if anybody's done that to date, but I guess that's generally your point. Are they just blowing the numbers out of the water? Are they close? Do these numbers need to be tweaked? So all of this, to my mind, is a compromise between the rights and desires of neighbors who live in residential houses with our businesses that seek to prosper in very difficult times. And it's just kind of the balancing of those two interests. But do we have any information, any real life data recently that shows what numbers, what decimals these venues are using?
No, not necessarily. I've got, I've had, if you will, let me see, if I parse through some data right here. Let's see. I've got some, looking at starting in November. I've got them at, sorry, this isn't the easiest thing to read. 7:30, I've got them at 63 decibels, between 57 and 60 decibels, 67.8 decibels. That was done 2 or 3 different readings. The next day, they were at 72 decibels. They were given a warning. Okay. A lot of times it looks like that we get there, as soon as they see us coming, they turn it down. Okay. Let's see. Back in November, showed 70 decibels on average.
Were you getting complaints when they were at 70 decibels?
Yes, sir, we were.
Okay, so the number you just, is this for distillers or is this for state theater, or where was
that? That was a complaint at the distillers.
So they were at 70. It looks like the numbers they were required to be at, was it 65 and 60, or what were the numbers they were required to be at?
65.
So they were at 70 getting complaints at 70. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and they needed to be at 65. Are you getting complaints where people are actually within the numbers they need to be? In other words, you get complaints, you go out there and you find that they're actually within the range they're supposed to be in?
Yes, we have. And then we've gotten complaints where the reading was, back in November, we've had the reading as high as 80. Okay, so like I said, I mean, our thing is that when we go up there to take a reading, we're driving up in a police car, and if anyone sees us coming up there and pulling out this device and holding it up, they kind of know what we're doing.
And you guys got unmarked cars, right? I mean, don't you have like some black SUVs? I mean, here's what I would suggest. If people are concerned as to what the decibels are and whether they're, they work or they don't work, we do need some more information probably. I mean, one thing you could do this weekend is just go to all the venues, take a reading and report back to us, where they are and whether you got any complaints at the whatever readings they might be. Hey, Falls Church Distillers got, 5 complaints, but they were at 65 or whatever they might have been, or 67. State Theater was at 72, no complaints. I think some more information probably be useful, and maybe hitting all of them if that's possible, maybe in an unmarked car if people are turning it down when they see you show up. That might be something useful to get, but we've got a whole bunch of questions here from people. Maybe we'll go ahead and go through those and see what if there's a consensus. But I do think at some point we need to start moving to wrap this up, because we've talked about this for weeks and weeks, and I think what's currently on the books is not enforceable. Ross, comment? Question?
Yeah. I did my homework on this 2 weeks ago. I actually went over to Falls Church Distillers and met with Mike. And I know we keep talking about a business, but I'll go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, most of these complaints have been aimed at Falls Church Distillers. So I took the time to go meet with Mike. I went over there when his band was getting set up on the weekend and when they started playing. And we went out with the noise meter and we talked. And I was very blunt with him and said, you know, I got to tell you, I've been on council for 3 years. And this noise ordinance has just now become an issue. And it's because of the bans that you guys have and bans and other complaints because of COVID. And so everybody understands that. We went out and measured the noise meter with a reading. And I can tell you, you know, when the band is inside, it's not a problem. The complaints that he's gotten are when the weather's nice, they open up the garage, they got the band that's playing out, and, you know, it hits the side of that building. However, what I will tell you is that the current decibel readings in the ordinance, in my opinion, are antiquated. And to Dave Snyder's comments, you know, we may not have had an issue with this before, but it is definitely going to be an issue now. One, because we spent such a long time beating this thing to death, and because I am now concerned that people are going to some extent use this as a tool or a bludgeon against, you know, things that may irk them for one reason or another. Because 65 decibels, taking that reading during the music, I mean, it was barely audible standing with my back up against the Tenor Hill building with that decibel meter. And the decibel that I'm speaking at right now in my own office is louder than that reading that we took when he had the band inside. And so talking through that with him and also talking with others in the city, you know, the 65 decibel reading for anyone that wants to have any entertainment outside is just, it's never going to pass unless you've got one guy with an acoustic guitar and he's 100 yards away from a property. I mean, frankly, I've got graduation parties at neighbors' houses that would, frankly, based on the ordinance that we have, I could call the police department and they'd have to go shut that thing down, just because 65 decibels, for anybody that's actually read that across a property line and understand it's across a property line, is totally unreasonable for anybody that wants to play entertainment. Now, I don't think that people should be waking folks up in the middle of the night or you know, disrupting people in residential neighborhoods. However, if we want businesses to continue to entertain outside in our business districts, then we need to modify this ordinance so it's reasonable. And so talking through this on what would be considered reasonable, a Friday or Saturday night up until 10 p.m., I would recommend that we make it 75 decibels. And I've made it abundantly clear to talk to Mike and other folks that I've talked to that, you know, this ordinance is coming regardless of the modifications, and people know that it's out there and it's going to be enforced because it has now been made an issue, and everybody understands that. However, I don't want to pass an ordinance where, even though we haven't had an issue with this in the past, and frankly, I didn't even know that this ordinance really existed to this technical degree, it needs to be something that is reasonable, because 65 is not. Again, I stood out in front of that and we adjusted the volume up and down on the speakers, and I stood on the property, across the street, up against the building, and 75 decibels even is reasonable. I mean, unless you've got paper thin windows. And so I think that I would like to Dave's comments, you know, passing this ordinance the way that it is right now without giving any flexibility to businesses to be able to offer entertainment outside, at least during the happy hour or the early evening hours on a Friday or Saturday night, is going to be a killer. I mean, at this particular decibel level, based on the way that this ordinance is written, State Theater, Clarendon's, and Falls Church Distillers would not be able to have outside music, because someone could stand across the street at a 65 decibel meter reading, call the police, and they would have to shut it down. So I think that we need to rethink this, and I'm not looking at making this change to give anybody a pass. It's simply that the decibel readings that people are complaining about are far in excess of what is actually in this. And so even at 75 decibels, those violations are occurring above that. So I think we need to pick a reasonable decibel level for reasonable hours related to entertainment in reasonable practical areas of the city where that would be offered, and pass an ordinance accordingly. So my recommendation is to either Friday or Saturday night, or both nights up until 10 p.m. in those districts. And it can be 5 to 10, it could be 6 to 10. We need to give them that ability to play music a little bit louder than just a group of us getting together and talking. And that's effectively what 65 decibel is. So I took the time, did the homework, met, listened, walked all over the property, different levels of music. And that's just my personal opinion and based on what I have heard. So let's pass an ordinance that's actually reasonable, so it doesn't hamper businesses and, as Dave mentioned, have unintended consequences, because that's exactly where this is going based on the way that it's written.
Vice Mayor Connolly? Did you have something else, Ross?
No, that's it.
Oh,
Thanks.
Vice Mayor Connolly?
Thanks, Mayor Charter. I just have a quick question regarding notifying the residents of Pearson Square and 455 that this is up for public hearing. Has communication gone out to those people who wrote to the city council, as well as others who live in the building who are suffering?
So the letter that was sent to the restaurants was provided to the property managers of those buildings, but it was not sent to the residents directly.
How about the people who wrote letters to city council? Do they get a notification that this is up for public hearing?
They did not get a direct letter that I'm aware of.
Okay, I think it would be good if they did get a direct, just something to say, here's the ordinance and we're having a public hearing next Monday, since this directly affects their lives. That's all I have.
Ms. Hardy?
I did actually write to everyone who wrote to us and let them know that the final vote was on March 8th and let them know kind of the public comments process. But that aside, Wyatt.
Thank you, Letty.
When, do we have an expiration date on when the flexibility for kind of because I think we currently extended the 9 p.m. cutoff to 10 p.m. because of COVID. Is there an end date for that, or is that just indefinite?
That was done under the emergency powers due to the declaration of emergency for COVID. So when that declaration is ended, that waiver would automatically end.
And we don't have line of sight to that yet?
We don't have a date for that, no.
Okay. Because I think we did hear from, I forget if it was Clarendon's or State Theater, when we got the big slew of public comments, that they certainly would like flexibility on the time. So whether it stays at 10 p.m. per the temporary extension or later, I think they view it as important for them to be able to recover from COVID once we're on the other side of it. So I think, again, the field trip would help us inform whether 65 decibels is the right thing and whether we think 10 p.m. would be reasonable for Friday and Saturday.
Phil Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're headed back. I'm trying to answer the questions in lines 85 through 91. And based on my thinking, I'm thinking we're heading back to first reading on this. I loaded a decibel reader onto my iPhone. I know it's not a professional grade equipment, but like most things on my iPhone, it could run a small nation. So our conversation has been recording it somewhere between 45 and 62 decibels here. 2 Saturdays ago, I think I went over to Distillers with my decibel reader, and it was a rainy, cold night. The band was playing indoors with the garage door down, doors closed, nobody sitting outside, and the band inside registered across the street at Tenor Hill at well above 60 consistently, which tells me we need to do what Letty says, and I think sort of what Ross has said, and what you might have suggested. We need to get some realistic data, and my thinking, just to close out, would be that the decibel level needs to be raised to 70, 75. The time window needs to be, don't start before 6, and you must stop at, pick a number, 9:30, if 10 o'clock seems pretty late. The problem with 10 o'clock is, and I stayed over at Distillers out in the street until after 10 o'clock, and the band was still playing, because the crowd was in there, they were having a good time. Yeah, one more, play one more. I mean, you could hear literally every word they were saying inside. Which tells me that if you say 9:30, they'll probably wrap up by 10. At any rate, before I'd be able to vote on this, I think I'd like to see the decibel level increased to something that's more realistic, and the time, narrowed to something that is, hopefully more tolerable to the neighbors who live close to all these venues. And this is going to count for like Dominion too, and their beer garden out back. They had live music there in the summertime, and I could hear it all the way over here on West Street and Parker. This is a fact of our new lives here in the city of Falls Church, is that we have some very popular restaurants, and they're going to want to do outdoor entertainment, and we'd like to accommodate that. And there's going to be a certain amount of noise that has not been a feature of our landscape up until very recently. And I'd at least like to get us started on an ordinance that would be realistic and enforceable, and see, let's try it for 6 months and see how it works. If it doesn't work, then, we try something else.
Mayor Tar, if I could just note a caution about anybody using a decibel meter from their phone. The machine, the ordinance has different decibel levels for percussive, for different wavelengths. It is much more sophisticated than what people are dealing with on their phone. And I think that the phone decibel meter can actually give probably a misrepresentation as to what actually is done on the street with a licensed decibel meter. And then the other pitch I would just make for just perhaps letting us do this as we have been doing it, but just with an ordinance that passes constitutional muster, is that these decibel levels are pretty universally applied, and they've also been consistent here in the city for many years. And so coming up with our own could be a recipe for many, many hours of discussion, and it might be avoidable, I guess, is my only thought.
I think that when we first talked about this, I was saying the same thing. I didn't feel like these decibel levels were what really happens, and we didn't have consequences for decibel levels that were really happening. And there was so much, you all did a lot of research to say this is what everybody else is doing. But if we're going to revise, I think one of two things. If we're going to revise it, ideally we revise it in totality so that it reflects what we're actually doing and what consequences we want, and it addresses all sides, addresses our residents, addresses our businesses. As a secondary approach, should we be splitting this to say we're just updating this ordinance to address I don't have the right legal phrase in front of me, but the original reason, not enforceable.
The constitutional problem.
Yes, the constitutional problem, and then gather data for 6 months with the decibel meters that we have now at each of those locations at different times, with the percussive noise, with the consistent noise. Maybe we split these two up if we're trying to address the constitutional issue so that we can have an enforceable ordinance in place. Is there a mechanism by which we can say, and we'd like to study for X period of time the decibel level? Just a suggestion, because I agree, if we're going to revise it, we want to revise it fully. But it seems to be two different pieces that we're trying to solve for.
I might suggest, as I did earlier, that the police go out this weekend and get some data for us. And it may not be dispositive on what we're going to do, but I think it'll be informative in terms of what actually is the real world data using a very precise device, not our phones, but something that would be used to issue violations, and just see. And then also tell us whether any complaints came in. In other words, if just at 68, do we get a slew of complaints, or really complaints don't really start arriving until 75 decibels? And so I'd like to know kind of where is it other people do. Other people may have different sensitivities than we do, and I'd at least like to be aware if the whole building's complaining at 72, whether I think it's right or not. I think it's informative what the people who live there think. I would also note as well that you know, the city is changing, even Clarendon's in the state, which seems like they're kind of out there, you know, without immediate neighbors. We just approved a project. It's going to put somewhere around 340 people, even closer than Pearson Square is to, you know, the Falls Church distillers. So I think this is going to be a problem throughout the whole city, but I might suggest we use this coming weekend to get some more data, official data, and then revisit this on Monday. I don't see how we're going to solve it today. Like, I don't think we're going to come up with a number today. It's 75, it's 70. I just, to me, we need some more data, but I mean, if other people agree, so be it. But I guess I would suggest maybe if the police department could go out and get some data, maybe in an unmarked car over the weekend, and present that to us on Monday.
And council, you will need to do a new first reading if you decide you're going to change decibel levels. We have not advertised as part of this ordinance any changes to decibel levels. They had been left alone. And I do think that that will probably, I mean, you should look at it this weekend, definitely, but I think that ultimately you'll find that will require a bit more time and consideration. And I would recommend that you fix the constitutional problem first. But if we want to get some information next week and start moving towards first reading with changes to the decibel levels, if that's what council decides, that'll be fine.
Okay, so why don't we wrap up this conversation? We do have another item still to go tonight. Does that sound like a plan that we will try to get some more data over this weekend, either through a visit by council members? If not, Wyatt, can you arrange maybe, I know the chief may have been on here earlier, or Officer Rao, or Captain Rao, to do some data research this weekend? Would that be possible?
We will certainly do that, yes.
Okay.
Police department's direct.
All right, great. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to our next item, unless anyone else has any final words on that particular matter. Mr. Shields, the proposed art comprehensive plan chapter.
Well, thank you, Mayor Tarter, and we have Emily Bazemore, who is a planner with our CPED staff, and she will take the staff lead on this item. And what we're asking tonight is to schedule a first reading and referral out to boards and commissions, and an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and the adoption of a public art district within the city, which would be an amendment to the comp plan map. Ms. Bazemore, if you could take the staff report away.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight, Council. I'm going to briefly walk through the staff report since it's rather late. To start with, the request tonight, you all are requested to review in a work session a proposed amendment to Chapter 3 of the Comprehensive Plan to add new policy goals and objectives to promote public art and a proposed arts and cultural district map. A public art plan was included as part of your work plan item, or as a work plan item in the City Council's adopted work plan. Recommendations, staff recommends that the City Council schedule first reading and referral to the Planning Commission at its March 8, 2020 council meeting. And also schedule a public hearing and final consideration for March 22nd, 2021 council meeting. Updates since you guys last saw these draft materials. You saw the materials at a work session on September 21st, 2020. There you reviewed a draft vision statement for public art, guiding principles, actions, and an arts and cultural districts map. Since your review of the draft materials, staff has presented them to the Planning Commission, the Arts and Humanities Council, the Architectural Advisory Board, the Chamber of Commerce, the Village Preservation and Improvement Society, the Economic Development Authority, the Historical Commission, and since the time of staff report, also the Historic Architectural Review Board. Starting on lines 34 of the staff report, there is a comment response matrix addressing various comments and questions that these different boards and commissions had. I'm just going to summarize a few. The Arts and Humanities Council, as well as VPIS and the Historic Commission, all recommended adding language that ties into how history plays an important role in public art and how we can use public art to utilize a way to remind us of our past. Also, the Arts and Humanities Council wanted to see a focus on employing local artists and promoting local employment and equity. Language has been added to the Public Art Amendment to do this. The Arts and Humanities Council and VPIS, again, were on the same page about incorporating church-owned land onto our Arts and Cultural District map. We have a revised map included in the amendment, as well as the staff report that includes houses of worship in the city. The Arts and Humanities Council and VPIS both called out St. James Catholic Church and the Falls Church Episcopal. And finally, the Chamber of Commerce suggested 2 different strategies being added to the amendment. So on the final page of the draft amendment, page 6, you'll see that we've added considering spaces of public art across the city, as well as a registry for public art that will be maintained by the Arts and Humanities Council. They'll update it as needed. All right, and moving into the draft materials themselves, based on requirements of the enabling legislation, you can find that on line 69 through 83 of the staff report. Staff is prepared 2 draft documents. The first is the draft amendment to Chapter 3, Community Character of the Comprehensive Plan. We've titled it Enriching Falls Church Public Art section of the Community Character, Appearance, and Design chapter of the Comprehensive Plan. We've also prepared a map of the potential arts and cultural districts in the city of Falls Church. This map can be found on page 15 of the staff report, and it can also be found on page 5 of the draft comp plan text. Moving through different components of the draft text, we have the draft vision statement included in the staff report. I'm just going to read it directly from the staff report. Public art celebrates the city's unique history and culture. It fosters equity in the artistic narrative and incorporates creative placemaking to support community development. We've also included some of the guiding principles to help achieve the goals of the vision statement. Here we have a commitment to community, we have a commitment to artists as contributors, a commitment to storytelling, a commitment to equity, and a commitment to the natural environment. Finally, our next, our draft Arts and Cultural District. The draft Arts and Cultural District map depicts portions of the city that staff has identified as suitable for the placement of public art. Here we have targeted lands depicted on the map that include our adopted revitalization areas, public-owned land, and of course, the addition of the houses of worship. The inclusion of the houses of worship is a recent update, again, to the map as recommended by several boards and commissions. Moving into our staff analysis, taken together, the proposed public art amendment to the comprehensive plan, as well as the Arts and Cultural District map, will serve as policy tools to encourage investment in public art throughout the city. Public art is important in all communities and becomes even more so when a city goes through a period of redevelopment and reinvestment. The policies promote consideration of public arts, art spaces, and art programming in both current and future land use applications. It outlines specific short-term actions as well as long-term strategies that the City of Falls Church can utilize to work towards its vision and commitment to public arts. Enabling legislation regarding the creation of an arts and cultural district allows for 4 different components of a public art district. These include a map, and then zoning and permitting allowances, taxing allowances, as well as other incentives. At this time, staff recommends establishing an arts and cultural district in the area shown on the Arts and Cultural District map, which will by ordinance be included in Chapter 3, Community Character, Appearance, and Design. Starting on 184 of the staff report, there's more details about the different boards and commission comments received throughout the process. But again, those are also detailed in the comment matrix earlier in the staff report. There is no fiscal impact when it comes to adopting the amendment and the map. And in regards to timing, there is a chart starting on line 272 of the staff report that details all the different dates when this went to boards and commissions, as well as our current date now at City Council work session on March 1st. And then materials will be reviewed by the Planning Commission this Wednesday on March 3rd. And that's all for my presentation.
All right, well, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it. We do have some questions and some comments, so if you'll indulge us, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Snyder, then Vice Mayor Connolly.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Could the presenter show the map? There you go, the map. And explain to us what areas are in the designated cultural area.
Right, so the areas that are in, they're highlighted in different colors. So there's lavender, mint, and then a light yellow. Those depict the different specific areas. So here we have public facilities and institutions, parks and open space in lavender, and then the revitalization districts in mint, and houses of worship in yellow. But as a whole, all of the different areas that are part of the proposed arts and cultural districts are also outlined in red.
Okay, and so this is an ordinance permitting or relating to public art in all the light green shaded areas. Is that what we're talking about? And the light, gray blue areas? I'm just trying to figure out what parts of the city were involved with here.
Right, so all areas that are outlined in red, but the specific details of those red outlined areas are listed below with the different shaded colors.
Okay, so it's everything outlined in red, and
Yes.
as you said, the different shaded colors indicate different uses, perhaps. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Does this in any way inhibit the Tinner Hill Foundation's work? I saw that they've got some murals going on, and I want to make sure we don't in any way inhibit their ability to move forward on that. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
No, right now it should not inhibit any work that they have begun. If anything, the document can be used to help to advocate for their public artwork that they are working on now.
Okay. Okay. I guess one other question. So there are residences within this area. Does this apply to like apartment buildings, single family homes? I mean, could someone paint something on the wall of their house? I'm just trying to figure out the scope of what we're talking about here. Is it purely commercial buildings and public buildings? And how do we define commercial for purposes of this?
That's a good question. It's not specified in the amendment text, but the thought is more commercial and, of course, public facilities and parks. And the thought was not residential, no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. You gave a really good presentation. I much appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Vice Mayor Connolly, followed by Ms. Hardy.
Thanks, Mayor Charter. This was the arts and the public art policy of Falls Church was the pet project of Barbara Cram. So I do feel like it'd be great if we could get this accomplished because Barb put so much work into this along the way. So I'm appreciative of that. I have a question about the houses of worship. Have the houses of worship been notified that they are included in the arts and cultural district?
As of right now, they have not. This is a very recent revision to the map that was made prior to it coming to work session. We can work on notifying them though, since they will be a stakeholder group in the future.
Is there any requirement then that whatever art a church wants to put up would have to go through this policy?
Currently, we do not have a specific review procedure that they would go through, but they would be part of the review. But there is no set requirement yet within the guiding document, the amendment itself.
Could I offer a clarification? Because I think we're confusing the difference between what we define as public art versus what we define as the public art district. Because Emily, I think my understanding is churches are part of the district, but the art they do wouldn't be considered public art. Because I think when we had Carol weigh in early when we defined the process and the guidelines, public art means it's either publicly funded, it's on a public facility, or it's proffered or a voluntary concession as part of a special exception.
Correct.
So if it's
correct.
private property, like on a church, and they're paying for it, it wouldn't be subject to city review.
Right. That's correct. Yes.
So they'd be part of the district, but they wouldn't be part of the review. Their art does not have to go through the city process.
Correct.
Got it.
So in all these areas that are the arts and cultural district, the only ones that would go through the city process are the ones that are on city-owned land, parks.
Or publicly funded or part of a special exception.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I still think we should notify the houses of worship that they are included. They don't really stand, none of them, well, a few of them stand alone there along Broad Street, where there is no other public arts and cultural district. That one's I just struggle with that one, and I think the fact that it came in the VPIS comments and the Arts and Humanities Council comments doesn't mean that two groups actually supported that. It means that VPIS is a member of the Arts and Humanities Council, so sometimes things get double counted that way. So that one is, I don't quite understand that one, but I'm willing to learn more. That's all I have.
Ms. Hardy?
Thanks. So one suggestion before I forget. So I think it's because we've been talking about public art for a while and have different vehicles for it. We've had the art guidelines, we have the map, and then we have this comp plan amendment. It's probably worth clarifying for people the scope of different things, because I think the district versus the definition of public art is probably important. So maybe a good thing to do when we have an official vote on it. My comment's really more for Wyatt and staff. So just like when we discussed the police reform discussion last week, I think policies and recommendations are only as good as where we put our budget and our priorities. And so while it's good that we have our map and we're talking about how important public art is, I'd love to make sure that we only have people and budget dollars allocated against this. And as I understand it now, we have $50,000 about per year that goes towards our nonprofit arts and humanities groups. And I think the majority of that money goes towards operations and not actually public art per se. And I also don't think that we actually have any staff allocated against any art projects other than kind of managing the Arts and Humanities Council. So while it's good that we're moving the amendments forward and have a map kind of for districts, and certainly we'll have a process to kind of evaluate art that comes through, we're not doing any new city-driven public art unless we put dollars and people against it. So I think that's something that we should consider either in this budget cycle or kind of future budget discussions.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? I would note in Arlington that their special exceptions, they have an expectation for public art, a contribution at a minimum towards a public art fund, and that's generally $75,000 per building. But anyway, that's just an aside. Any other comments or questions about this particular matter? Thank you, Ms. Basmore, for doing this. This is a great presentation. We look forward to hearing more from you, and thank you so much for coming out this evening.
Thank you, Council.
All right, so let's move on. The last bit of our meeting tonight is just about council schedule and council comments. Are there any comments that people want to make that they haven't made tonight? Anything else that anybody wants to say before we adjourn?
Just a reminder about the town hall tomorrow. I think we mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting 4, 5, 8 hours ago. Noon,
all right?
Tomorrow at noon.
Yeah. Vice Mayor Connolly?
I just want to note that today is the first day of Women's History Month, and there'll be a number of things going on in the city celebrating the women who have shaped our community in the past, the ones who are shaping our community now, and women of the future. So keep an eye out for all that and participate when you can.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. Other comments, questions, requests from anyone in council? All right, well, we'll reconvene, I guess, Wednesday morning. But in the meantime, unless there's anything else, I suggest we go ahead and adjourn and call it a night. What do you all think?
Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, council.
Take care.
Good night, everyone.